Chapter 1197. Just as Finkin had said, there were not many people in the vast academy. The three of them passed through the buildings and finally stopped in front of a towering wall. This is the west wall of the flying field. Finkin took out a wooden ladder from a corner and placed it on the wall. Follow me. Good hesitated for a moment, but he still followed Finkin and climbed up. When he reached the top of the wall, he could not help but exclaim in a low voice. The slanting sun was slowly approaching the sea, and the glistening waves reflected the center of the sea in a golden hue. The sky that had turned from blue to yellow seemed to have an additional layer of thickness. The clouds above their heads extended all the way to the horizon, like a slope sliding into the sea. The empty and flat flying field beneath their feet was the starting point for them to ascend into the sky. The sea breeze blew across the land, instantly dispelling the frustration in his chest. He could not help but close his eyes and slowly stretch out his hands. He imagined himself hovering in the air with a joystick in his hands, waiting for the command to take off. The view is nice, right? Finkin chuckled. This is a treasure land that I discovered. The only thing we need to be careful is not to fall. Heinz was the last to climb up the wall. Phew, what should we do next? Of course we go there. He pointed to a row of warehouses not far away. The seagull seemed to have come out from one of these warehouses. The end of the warehouse was not far from the wall, about 2 meters apart. But we have to bring the ladder. The three of them were no strangers to walking on the narrow top of the wall. Their usual balance training was also done on a single plank bridge. After a quarter of an hour, they approached their destination. These warehouses were about 2 to 3 meters higher than the wall. It was not practical to climb up directly, but the tall windows were just opposite the top of the wall. As long as they stood on tiptoe, they could see inside the warehouse. Mask plane. Mask plane. I found it. Finkin suddenly stopped and said. Good followed his gaze, and his heart skipped a beat. There were 4 biplanes neatly placed in a warehouse, but they were not covered with linen. Instead, they were openly displayed in front of the three of them. The smooth wings and smooth bodies made it difficult for Good to take his eyes off them. The thought that one day he could pilot such an incredible thing and soar with the birds made him extremely excited. So what if he was a knight? The sky was where he should be. Finkin put the ladder on the windowsill and clapped his hands in satisfaction. In this way, we're not in violation of the no-entry order. Although he knew that there was an obvious loophole in this explanation, Good could not resist the impulse in his heart. He followed the man into the storeroom through the high window. What was inconceivable was that after seeing the real thing, his uneasy mood calmed down. After landing, the two of them ran to the nearest plane at the same time, and he walked at the back. Wow, this is really amazing. Heinz touched the fuselage and said, It looks like it's made of metal. That's right, and it's as thin as a layer of skin. Look. Finkin pressed his finger hard, and a small dent appeared on the surface. I really don't know how it's made. Hey, be careful. It's over if you break it. Don't worry, it's very elastic. Really? Let me try to. Unlike the two of them, Good did not circle around the plane in amazement. He felt like he was being pulled by something and climbed into the plane along the lower wing. There seemed to be a voice in his heart, guiding him to the nose of the plane. On the cover of the flight manual, Princess Royal Highness was sitting in that position, turning the land and the sea into a painting under her. Then Good stepped into the pilot's seat and sat firmly on the seat. So, this is what the world looks like in the eyes of the aerial knight. The long straight wings on top of his head and the supporting frame on both sides blocked most of his vision, but it also focused his eyes on the front. The chair behind him was wrapped in soft leather, and he could even smell the milky smell of new leather. The instrument panel was no longer painted on a wooden board, but was covered with transparent glass. The control stick and pedals were made of metal, and the top of the control stick was covered with a layer of semi-soft gelatinous material, which was comfortable and not slippery. Good held the control stick and pulled it down slightly. Suddenly, he heard a clicking sound behind him. Different from the wooden pole on the training platform, he felt that he was indeed pulling something. The vibrating steel wire gave him clear feedback, instead of the feeling of emptiness and powerlessness he had felt before. As he continued to pull, the control stick became heavier and heavier. as if it was responding to his movements. My God! What are you doing? Heinz's voice interrupted his thoughts. Good suddenly let go of his hand. I'm just… You want to practice? Finkin teased. Who said I was crazy? As soon as we arrived, you climbed into the pilot's seat without saying a word. Didn't you say you were just going to look? Sorry, I couldn't help it. Don't worry, he interrupted. Since this is what we've been training, it won't break if we try it. But after you're done, come down quickly. I haven't been inside yet. Wait a little longer, Good said reluctantly. I just tried to pull the lever. Why don't you sit in the back seat first? Wait, what about me? Heinz also climbed onto the wing of the plane. Just as the three of them were scrambling for the seat, a shrill unlocking sound came from the closed door. Good's expression changed drastically. Heinz also panicked. Why? Why would someone come at this time? What should we do? Only Finkin remained calm. It's too late to run. Let's hide first. However, there was no place to hide in the spacious hangar, and the seats were too narrow to fit 3 adults. Before they could climb off the plane, someone had already entered the hangar. Who's that? Stop. Don't move. With a series of cracking sounds, Good found himself surrounded by the guards of the First Army. Facing the loaded guns, the 3 of them did not dare to resist. Soon they were pressed to the ground. What's going on? A familiar figure appeared in front of them. It was Princess Tilly Wimbledon. Intruders? Before the guards could answer, Finkin had already lowered his head and shouted, Your Highness, we were wrong. We're all students of the first batch. We just wanted to see what the plane we're going to pilot looks like, so we snuck in. Please forgive us. So you also know that it's against the rules, Good complained in his heart. This is the end. After asking all the questions, Her Royal Highness nodded expressionlessly. I see. According to the rules, you'll be confined for more than 15 days and lose the qualification to become an air knight forever. As for whether you'll be a ground crew or a chores officer, it's up to you. Go back and report to your superior. Yes, the 2 of them said bitterly. Good's heart immediately sank. Seeing that the guards were about to drag them out, he somehow mustered up the courage to raise his head and shout, Your Highness, please. I just want to be a pilot. I'm willing to do anything for it. And I think I lack the feeling of flying. No matter how much I practice, it won't help me. That's why I'm here, not just because I'm curious. Oh. Tilly suddenly raised her eyebrows. You mean feeling? Yes, I can't match the rules in the manual with the operation. It's like I'm flying, but I can't feel the wind. I know it should be. He thought hard. I don't know how to describe it. I just feel that no matter how hard I practice, I can't coordinate. Nonsense. What kind of reason is that? TSK, is this guy crazy? Hurry up and drag him away, lest he annoys Princess Tilly. There was a murmur among the guards. Tilly, on the other hand, looked at him thoughtfully. You're good, right? I remember Eagle Face reported that your grades are pretty good. You're also the first one to adapt to the magic movie training, and you practice very hard. Before he could speak, she interrupted him. How was it? The feeling of boarding the plane. Good was stunned. Didn't you say you lacked the feeling of flying? How about now? Do you think you can fly? He hesitated, clenched his fists and said, Your Highness, I think I can. Then give it a try. Tilly turned around and no longer looked at him. In fact, I plan to start the real plane training tomorrow. For others, they can always try again if they fail, but you don't. If you fail, you'll be expelled from the academy. Of course, you can also accept the punishment. You can choose. I want to fly. This time, Good answered almost without hesitation. Chapter 1198. After dinner, Roland heard about it from Tilly. Because of the feeling? He was stunned when Tilly told him the reason for changing her mind. Why? Can't I? Tilly crossed her arms. No, the rules of the Aerial Knight Academy are set by you. Of course, you have the final say. Roland quickly waved his hand. I'm just curious. What does the feeling represent? It represents talent. Sure enough, you don't know anything about flying. Tilly shrugged. For most people, practicing is nothing more than completing tasks according to the instructions in the manual. Apart from performing the actions themselves, there is nothing else, even in the sky. But some people can visualize every action, and before they take action, they can already see the result of the action. Is it that amazing? Roland twitched his mouth. He did not deny that he knew nothing about flying. Without Tilly's help, the aerial night project would have been impossible. It was impossible to build a qualified plane based on the blueprints in the dream world. Whether it was the trial production, improvement, finalization, or training, Tilly's participation was indispensable. If it were an ordinary person, it might take decades to turn the blueprints into a real plane, and then use the plane in combat. But the plane was a machine, after all. Shouldn't the machine be operated according to the manual and repeated practice? Because that's how I am. Tilly showed a look of regret. If you can't imagine it, it means you don't have the talent in this area. Brother, if you are also a member of the Aerial Knight Academy, I'm afraid you will be eliminated. Ahem. Roland almost choked on his own saliva, and Nightingale's laughter came from behind him. Do you think you can master flying just by practicing? Tilly seemed to read his mind. There are indeed some people who can connect the action with the feeling after thousands of practice, but don't forget that this is a talent in itself, just slightly inferior to the former. Most people would never be able to reach this step. Just being able to fly was already not an easy feat. Who do you think has a better chance of surviving the war? Roland was speechless. Without a doubt, the answer was outstanding talent. Spending the same amount of time to train, these types of people would often be able to reach a higher level and quickly accumulate experience in battle. Meanwhile, those with mediocre abilities would find it difficult to even protect themselves, let alone improve further. In terms of the cost-effectiveness of training, the former could be several times that of the latter. But we can't be sure of anything with just one explanation, right? He was silent for a while before he said, After all, there's still the possibility of a coincidence. That's why you'll know everything after flying once, Tilly said indifferently. What about the other two? They all chose to test the flight. Oh, Roland blinked in surprise. Expelling the Knight Academy was not a light punishment in this era, especially when the head of the academy was Her Royal Highness. It would leave a disgraceful mark on his resume, and it would be much more difficult to apply for other jobs in the future. Secondly, the ground crew and chores were paid well, and it was also a stable job. They could also enjoy some preferential policies from the academy, such as housing and medical care. Compared with the former and the latter, there was a big difference. They're brave. Don't you think it's a pity to expel them like this? After all, there were less than 200 trainee pilots in Neverwinter, and each one was precious. The Air Knight Academy doesn't need people without talent. Courage is just a suicide mission in the face of devil beasts. It's better to let them leave as soon as possible, Tilly said in a low voice. At this point, the atmosphere in the office became a little tense. Just when Roland was about to pour a drink to ease the atmosphere, Tilly took the initiative to change the topic. By the way, I wanted to ask you about the previous matter. Do you have any clue about my new plane? Sure enough, she did not come to the office just to talk about work. Roland's heart skipped a beat. I think we can discuss this in the long run. The establishment of the Air Force is inseparable from you. Besides, if you stay in Neverwinter, you'll be a greater threat to the demons. Tilly did not answer, but her burning eyes showed her attitude. Roland sighed inwardly. The new plane did not refer to the unicorn, but a more powerful flying weapon suitable for combat. After Ash's death, Tilly cried in his arms for a long time. She was as sad as a helpless child, but that was also the last time he saw her weak side. When she woke up, the first thing she said to him was, I want a plane that can kill demons. She wanted to take revenge on the demons. Although Roland had used a lot of excuses at that time, Tilly obviously did not change her mind. Do you really want to do this? You didn't have so many concerns when you ambushed Osrook. That's transportation. It's completely different from a head-on battle. In fact, there's not much difference. I'm using my ability where it's most needed. Tilly shook her head. I agreed with this view, So I persuaded Ashes to go to the front. You also know that if you want to take back the sky from the demons, the current Air Knight can't guarantee victory. Neverwinter is at a disadvantage both in terms of quantity and level. Only I can reverse this situation. But the Academy? Of course I'll take responsibility. Before the war, as long as I train a group of qualified instructors, they can continue to expand and pass on the Air Knight team. Tilly was silent for a moment. She stared at Roland and said word by word, I know it's a little capricious, but this is my only request, brother. Roland looked at her for a long time and finally let out a long sigh. I understand. Tilly loosened her clenched fists. Thank you. By the way, do you have any requirements for the color of the fuselage? Roland suddenly asked when she was about to leave. Puzzled, Tilly stopped and said, Know this? Since there's no specific requirement, how about red? What's the difference? Generally, the protagonists who dominate the sky use this color, Roland said softly. Really? Tilly slightly raised the corner of her mouth. Then we'll do as you said, use red. When the door closed, Nightingale said with a complicated expression, Her Highness, she's serious. Roland rubbed his forehead as if he had a headache. That's why it's so troublesome. When Tilly said my only request, he could even feel her strong obsession and hope. There was no one else but him who could help her realize her desire for revenge. If he refused and let this hope turn into despair, he vaguely realized that he might lose her. She's also changed. Nightingale sighed. But I can understand her. If you're the one in trouble. She paused for a while and then shook her head as if giving up. No, I don't even dare to think about it. Roland could not help but fall silent. He suddenly remembered a saying, War will change many things in people, but the only thing that will not change is war itself. Chapter 1199. Good did not even know how he got back to the temporary residence. By the time he arrived at his house, it was already dusk. People who had been busy the whole day were returning to their residences one after another. Smoke and shouts could be heard everywhere. The fragrance of porridge mixed with the sour smell of sweat showed how busy this place was. Although there was an endless amount of work to be done every day, everyone's expressions were full of energy. It didn't look like a refugee settlement at all. And what gave them energy was hope. As long as they were busy for a day, they would be able to fill their stomachs for several days. If they were busy for 10 days to half a month, they would be able to add 2 eggs or a piece of steak to their bowl. Therefore, people naturally had expectations. If they were busy for a year and a half, what would they become? With this hope in mind, everyone's voice became more energetic. Although the temporary housing area was dirty and noisy, it was not as dark and gloomy as the slums. Everything here was colorful. Except for Good. The more he looked at the smiles of his neighbors, the more dizzy he felt. There seemed to be a voice echoing in his heart. Look what you've done, idiot. You've ruined everything that you've worked so hard for. That's right. If he hadn't shouted and accepted the punishment, he would still be a student of the Aerial Knight Academy. Even if he could not be a driver, it would still be a good job, at least much better than being a refugee. He had answered without hesitation at that time, but when Her Royal Highness really agreed, his courage receded like the tide and was replaced by guilt and fear. If he failed, he would really have nothing. Good opened the door absent-mindedly and walked into the house. A clear voice rang out. Good, you're back. Look at what I've done. Rachel ran to him cheerfully, pushed him to the table, and opened the porcelain pot covering the plate. Dang 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 dang. Egg pancake, how is it? The egg and wheat cake were divided into 2 layers. It was not so much an egg pancake, but more like a fried egg on a wheat cake. However, this was not a failed dish. The egg white was spread very thin, with a circle of yellow curls around it. The orange egg heart was slightly raised, still retaining the smoothness when it had not yet solidified. The melted butter was sandwiched between the two and dripped into the plate through the gap, giving off a tempting aroma. Obviously, Rachel had put a lot of effort into this dinner. Good was startled. You bought eggs? Although the prices in Neverwinter were not high, it was still not a regular dish for them. Yes. Rachel handed him the wooden fork. I went to the convenience market with Uncle Baggy today. Don't worry, I still have some savings left. It's rare for you to have a day off, so it's not a problem to eat once in a while. Besides, if you become an official aerial knight, your savings will rise back very quickly. I know that. She even patted her chest after saying that. Good took the fork stiffly. You're right. Don't say anything else. Try my skills first, Rachel said expectantly. He hesitated for a moment, then slowly forked the soft egg and put it into his mouth. In an instant, the heart of the egg gushed out and blended with the mellow flavor of the butter, instantly filling his entire mouth. At the same time, this delicacy struck the deepest part of his heart. They had suffered a lot when they fled from the kingdom of Wolfheart to the western region of Greycastle. They did not even dare to dream of eating such delicious food. But after he came to Neverwinter, the situation miraculously improved. Not only did he have a stable place to live, but he could also live a carefree life. Rachel might even be able to eat the egg pancake he ate every day instead of watching him eat it, as long as he continued to stay in the academy. Indeed, he longed to fly to the blue sky, but was it really worth it to sacrifice everything? In the past, he had nothing to lose, but now it was different. He had promised to take good care of her. If that was the case, why did he make such a selfish choice? He even agreed to peep at the plane with Finkin because he only thought about himself. Now such a selfish person was eating the food made by Finkin. It was so hateful, wasn't it? How about it? It's not bad, right? I haven't done this for a long time. I don't know if my skills have deteriorated. Rachel put her fingers together and said, Hey, can you do it or not? Say something. Wait. Why are you crying? Did I do that badly? No. Good cried while stuffing food into his mouth. It's delicious. It's so delicious. I just couldn't help it. Rachel was stunned for a moment. Then she stood up and walked to his side. She reached out her hand to press his head and asked softly, What happened? I'm sorry. I might not be able to stay in the academy anymore. Intermittently, Good told him everything he had done. I see. Rachel was silent for a long time. She waited for him to calm down before she said, I just want to ask you a question. Do you like flying? Good opened his mouth, but under Rachel's gaze, he found that he could not say anything against his will. After a long time he nodded. That's good, Rachel said with a smile. This is the first time you've done something you want to do, right? I was the one who offered to take me away from that place. You've done a lot for me in the kingdom of Wolfheart, and on the way to escape. These things should have nothing to do with you. How could you be a selfish guy? But the worst result is that I have to start from scratch, right? She tilted her head and said, And I'm literate. Even if I don't do those things, I can still find a lot of work. So no matter whether it works or not, I just have to try my best. Is this really okay? It's too late to regret. It's better to stop thinking about other things and focus on this. Of course, next time you encounter such a thing, you should think twice. Don't be impulsive. Good stared at her for a while. I think sometimes you know more than I do. Age doesn't equal knowledge. You insisted on making me your sister, Rachel muttered. Then she smiled and said, If you're expelled from the academy, you can just call me sister. The next day, Air Night Airport. The 16 preparatory team members stood in a row at the end of the runway. As the first batch of qualified candidates, they would be the first to accept the test flight. For brand new planes slowly glided out of the hangar and stopped in front of them. There was a commotion in the crowd. Everyone looked at the 4 beautiful planes with great interest and whispered to each other excitedly. Finkin and Heinz, on the other hand, looked gloomy. Good closed his eyes. Feeling the cool morning breeze blowing against his face, he tried to grasp the feeling in his mind. The day after day of training, the instructor's teaching, and the moment when he held the real machine's handle. Several images kept rotating, and gradually, they became inseparable. When Tilly appeared in front of the team, everyone knelt on one knee. Finkin even gave Good a hand. Your Royal Highness. Get up. Tilly glanced at them expressionlessly. Although it's the first time you've seen these planes, you're familiar with them. Both the illustrations in the textbooks and the principles you learn are based on the unicorn. These planes are the optimized version of the unicorn, which is more stable in performance. As long as you follow the training steps, you'll be able to fly the simplest flight. However, considering that it's your first time in the air, I'll fly near the pilot seat as an instructor and tell you what to do step by step. You'll be graded according to your performance. Of course, if I don't say anything, that's the best performance. She paused for a moment and then said, however, I don't rule out the possibility that someone might make a mistake or even crash in such a simple operation. Therefore, I've invited Miss Nana. She's in the airport now. As long as you don't die immediately, you'll be able to survive. However, that also means that your score will be greatly discounted. If you can't improve after training, you'll be kicked out of the team. Therefore, I hope you can do your best and do your best. In addition, if you make a serious mistake that causes the plane to be damaged, your score will be reduced to 0. After all, the Academy doesn't have that many planes for you to waste. Do you understand? Yes, Your Royal Highness, the 16 students said in unison. Then let's begin. The first pilot, good, Tilly said in a low voice. Chapter 1200. A guard inserted the handle into the nose of the plane, turned it several times, and then suddenly pressed down on the throttle. A violent tremor suddenly spread from the nose to the tail. In this tremor, the engine made a series of popping sounds, driving the propeller to run quickly. When the roar turned into a continuous buzzing sound, Good followed the instructions in the manual and slowly pushed the throttle lever. The plane seemed to be pulled by something and slid onto the runway. Wow! There was a burst of exclamation from the crowd. It actually worked. Good was also greatly encouraged. It was acting according to his instructions, and he was driving this big guy. He could not help but look at Her Royal Highness, who was squatting on the left side of the wing. He saw her gray hair fluttering in the wind, and her eyes seemed to be smiling. Was the princess praising him? Good became more confident. Next, as long as he followed her instructions, there should be no problem flying. However, after more than 10 breaths, there was still no instruction from his side. Good repeatedly looked at Tilly, but all he got was a faint smile. When the plane crossed the middle line of the runway, he suddenly realized a fact. He would not receive any instructions. But considering that this is your first time flying, I will fly near the pilot seat as a guide, and remind you step by step what to do. This sentence did not include him. Her Royal Highness was taking care of ordinary students, not him, who had violated the rules and made mistakes. Just like other students who failed, they could always try again, but he only had one chance. Good suddenly felt his hands and feet cold, and the sense of loss and regret from yesterday surged into his heart again. Being able to make me not say anything is undoubtedly the best performance. He vaguely guessed what Her Royal Highness was thinking. If he could not rely on his own ability to fly, if he could not get the best results, then the Academy would not allow him to stay. This was the price of making mistakes. Only by showing enough ability would he have the value to continue to stay here. But could he really make this plane fly? At this time, only 1/3 of the runway was left, and there was a grassland at the end, and further away was the wall of the airport. If he directly crashed into it, even Miss Nana would not be able to do anything. No. It's too late. Good instinctively wanted to pull on the accelerator. This seemed to be the only way to save his life. He wanted to slow down and avoid a head-on collision. When faced with an unavoidable high wall, this was almost an instinctive choice. But in the next moment he felt a hand on his head. Do you like flying? Rachel's voice sounded like it was right beside his ear. Flying, that's right. If it was a bird, there was another way out. That was to fly over the top of the wall. If he retracted his wings now, there would be nothing left. After what seemed like a moment, and also like a long time, Good's hand that was tightly gripping the handle moved again. However, he did not pull it back, but pushed it forward. The nose of the plane let out a roar. The wall seemed to be crashing into him. It was not until the last 10 meters that he abruptly pulled the nose up. With a shake of the fuselage, the runway suddenly disappeared from his sight, replaced by the rapidly passing grassland. For a moment he felt weightless. as if his body was as light as a swallow. The earth was falling, and he was rising into the sky. Faster, just a little faster. Good widened his eyes and stared at the edge of the wall that was getting closer and closer. He was even ready to receive the impact. But that moment did not come. The plane almost skimmed over the top of the wall and rushed into the blue sky. When the obstacle in front of him completely disappeared, a scene that he had never seen before appeared in front of him. The silhouette of the academy, the shape of the coast, and the distant city of Neverwinter were reflected in his vision one by one. They rotated along with his movements, and the blowing morning breeze filled the last gap in his senses. At this moment, he found the benchmark that he had practiced day after day. Such a free experience made him want to shout out loud. It was really great that humans could fly. After the plane landed, Good knelt in front of Her Highness. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. You let me see the scene that I could only see in my dreams. During the nearly half-an-hour test flight, he basically completed several major standard movements such as pulling up and hovering. Although the process was a little bumpy, he finally completed them one by one. As for how many points he would get in the end, he could only leave it to fate. Even if he still did not meet the requirements of the princess, at least he had left an unforgettable memory. From now on, as long as he closed his eyes, the world would suddenly expand a lot. Why did you join the Air Knight Academy? Tilly's voice came from above his head. Good hesitated for a moment, and finally decided to tell the truth. Your Highness, at first I wanted to earn more money, then I wanted to stand out, and now I want to fly. Whether it's money, fame, or flying, I can give it to you. As long as you can kill enough demons. The princess's statement was as calm as ice. Fight for Grey Castle. Pilot the plane to kill every demon that appears in sight, and use their blood to exchange for everything. This is the duty of the Air Knight, and also the purpose of the Academy. If you can do it, report back to Eagle Face. Good looked up excitedly and said, Your Highness, you mean? You pass. Tilly walked to the line without looking back. It was not until 5 o'clock in the afternoon that the first round of flight test came to an end. 2 of the 16 people were eliminated, but fortunately, they all survived. Finkin and Heinz passed the test right after Good. When it was time to disperse, the 2 of them grabbed Good and dragged him to the side of the field. Are you crazy? Her Highness Tilly said that it would be considered a pass if you succeeded in flying, but you hesitated at the beginning and didn't increase your speed. Not only did you almost hit the wall, but you also flew out of the Academy district and circled in the sea. Aren't you afraid of falling into the sea and drowning? That was an accident. Good rolled his eyes and said, Didn't Her Highness ask us to do our best before we took off? I didn't know that I would pass as long as I could pull up and land. I just thought that the total score of several actions would be higher than 1. You're lucky. Finkin shook his head helplessly. You're not bad either. He curled his lips and said, You took off so decisively without any instructions. What? What do you mean by no instructions? Didn't Her Highness tell you when to pull the lever? Yes, it's just that she gave us fewer instructions than the others, Heinz echoed. After all, we all made mistakes. Good could not help but be stunned. Was he the only one among them who had not received any instructions at all? The 3 of them returned to the dormitory area in bewilderment and confusion. As soon as they entered the gate, Good saw Eagle Face standing on the field with a frosty face. The 3 of them shuddered at the same time. In a sense, the trainees were more afraid of this instructor than the Princess Royal, especially Eagle Face's eyes. When they were stared at, they were like prey with nowhere to escape. Yes, sir. You're quite capable. It's not easy for you to have a day off, but you still cause trouble for me. He glanced coldly at Good and the others. I've heard from Her Highness Tilly that you should be glad that you haven't joined the army, and this is not the jurisdiction of the First Army, otherwise. Sir, we were wrong. The 3 of them hurriedly apologized in the most sincere tone. Since Her Highness has already punished us, I won't say anything more. But as long as you want to be an Air Knight, you'll become a member of the army sooner or later. Eagle Face stopped sneering and said seriously, In order to deepen your impression of me and avoid making the same mistake again, in the next month, you'll be responsible for cleaning the toilets. Do you understand? Ah. Finkin and Heinz immediately put on a bitter face. Good was the only one who raised his hand and saluted excitedly. Chapter 1201. The test flight, which lasted for nearly a week, was a crucial step for the Air Knight Academy. The training of the preparatory students was finally on the right track, but its impact was far from limited to the academy. In fact, on that day, some people had already noticed the giant kite hovering over the southern part of the city. Although Tilly occasionally flew the unicorn over the Lord's castle, most of the time she chose to conduct the test in the uninhabited area. Most people had only heard of the existence of the plane, but had never seen it with their own eyes. The Air Knight Academy did not have to worry about this. Curious people went to the southern part of the city and gathered on both sides of the road, waiting for the moment when the plane flew over the wall. At first, it was only limited to the residents near the shallow port and the factory area. However, as the news spread quickly, by the third day, the academy was surrounded by a group of onlookers. Every time a plane appeared in their field of vision, the crowd would burst into enthusiastic cheers and exclamations, as if they were the ones flying into the blue sky. Honey seized the opportunity and used the title, "Miracle Happens Again," as the title, using a large page to report the test being carried out in the academy, and attached a clear close-up photo of the biplane. In an instant, the sales of the Grey Castle Weekly soared to a new peak. There was even a buying frenzy in Neverwinter. Perhaps realizing the business opportunity, many foreign businessmen began to buy newspapers from the public at a high price after the weekly expense report was sold out. Those who did not have enough money would hire someone to copy the newspapers, and even hand-draw the photos of the plane. For a while, the paper price in the market was very high. Thanks to this, the name of the Air Knight Academy finally spread throughout Neverwinter. A week later, Roland received the summary report from Tilly. Among the 197 preparatory students, a total of 150 had passed the test, which meant that there were a total of 47 crashes caused by operational errors during the whole test period. Considering that there were only 4 planes in the first batch, each plane crashed more than 11 times on average. It sounded a little unbelievable, but Roland knew that the structure of these planes was simple and light. As long as the engine was not damaged, it could be repaired quickly. In addition, most of the crashes occurred during the landing phase. It was either because the speed was too slow and the entire plane slammed into the runway, or because the speed was too fast and broke the landing wheels, only stopping due to friction with the plane's belly. Such damage was common in the era of biplanes, and it could be dragged back to be repaired. It would be a good plane again. Of course, patched planes weren't as good as when they left the factory. Tilly also mentioned that the condition of the 2 planes that could still fly had greatly deteriorated, and it was difficult for them to meet the training requirements. In order to ensure the quality of teaching, the academy urgently needed a new batch of biplanes. In addition, due to the increase in training content and the subsequent expansion of personnel recruitment, for aircraft could no longer meet the requirements. Based on the overall efficiency of the training and the actual needs, at least 12 to 15 of them should be provided. This was also the number of flying squadrons in the future. Roland realized that no matter how he looked at the report, there was only one sentence hidden between the lines. The Air Force send money. After putting down the report, Roland shook his head helplessly. He could only say that Tilly was indeed talented in this aspect. She had seen through the essence of the Air Force at the beginning stage. In fact, to form a qualified flying unit, there must be a large number of people for screening, and there must be enough planes for them to crash. Neither of the two could be dispensed. Now that all industries in Neverwinter were in urgent need of manpower, it was obviously impossible to produce a large number of planes in a short period of time. Roland could only rely on Anna to slowly gather the necessary manpower. In addition to Tilly, the General Staff also submitted an observation report, written by Edith Kant. The report was very short, but the content was quite interesting. The Pearl of the Northern Region believed that as long as it was used properly, the aerial knight could possibly change the situation of the future war, or even become a decisive force in the war. She hoped to select a group of people from the General Staff to set up a research group to be stationed in the academy to understand the performance of this new weapon, so that it could be used in the future plans. At the same time, she also conceived some tactics that only the aerial knight could carry out. She wanted to have a private discussion with Roland. She could not wait any longer. Edith was probably the ordinary person who paid the most attention to the plane among the higher-ups in Neverwinter. The moment she saw the mass production of the plane, she immediately thought of its application in the war. Not to mention the feasibility of the plan, just her acumen alone was really admirable. Just as Roland was about to summon the Pearl of the Northern region to discuss her views on the aerial knight, a guard's voice came from outside the office. Your Majesty, the Minister of Construction, Car Van Bate, requests to see you. He withdrew his hand from the phone and said, "Let him in." Yes, Your Majesty. Your Majesty. Car walked into the office and bowed respectfully. Your miracle building has been successfully completed. Standing under the podium building and looking up at the towering main body, Roland really felt the charm of the word wonder. It took nearly 2 years, tens of thousands of golden dragon, enough steel to build 3 red water bridges, and enough concrete to pile up into a hill to finally complete the building. Without the help of Lotus, Hummingbird, and the other witches, it would have consumed several times more manpower and resources. It was not just a joke that a wonder would harm the country. Similarly, the people of Neverwinter were absolutely shocked by the completion of the building, which could be seen from the people who flocked to watch the completion ceremony from all directions. The so-called gap between the 2 and the 3-story buildings was even clearer when compared to the so-called Wonder Building. Compared to the surrounding 2 to 3-story residential areas, the 56-meter-tall, 15-story Miracle Building could be said to stand out from the rest. Even Roland, who was used to seeing tall buildings, could not help but feel a surge of excitement in his heart. As the new landmark of Neverwinter, it was not a simple and useless project, but the culmination of a variety of new technologies. For example, the water supply and drainage problem. Carr used the method of setting up multi-level water tanks on each floor to solve the problem of not being able to pump water, due to the large height difference. In addition, for external elevators, were installed at the 4 corners of the main building. They were driven by the steam engine in the basement, and could carry dozens of people back and forth between the top floor and the bottom floor. Although they were not as intelligent as modern elevators, which had to be operated by special personnel, and could not stop at every floor, it was still an amazing design for this era. In particular, the elevators used a large number of floor-to-ceiling glass, so people could overlook the beautiful city while riding, which was totally a pleasure. Your Majesty, say something. After climbing up the podium building, Carr put his hand on his chest and said, Your people are all waiting for you. Roland nodded, walked to the fence, and waved to the dense crowd below. The crowd immediately burst into enthusiastic cheers. Good afternoon, people of Neverwinter. Today is the day when the Miracle Building is completed. It is the best in the world, and history will remember this day. But I don't want to talk about its great significance. I want to talk about the question that you are most concerned about. Who will live in it? Or, who will it be built for? Nobles? No, Greycastle has abolished the right to infect the nobles. The royal family? Of course not. I don't need such a big place to put my bed. The answer is actually very simple. It will be the residents of Neverwinter. That is all of you. It is you who created the Miracle Building, and you will undoubtedly enjoy this miracle. Every room will be priced in the administrative office. You don't need special privileges or family background. As long as you bring your resident ID card, you can apply for the purchase and live in this building that is destined to go down in history. As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd burst into deafening cheers. Long live His Majesty! Long live Neverwinter! After the cheers subsided, Roland continued loudly. Now, I will light the torch on the top of the building. From now on, when the night falls, it will burn brightly and become the most dazzling star over Neverwinter. Amid the overwhelming cheers of the crowd, he led the people from City Hall into the elevator and went up to the top of the main building. A huge stone basin was placed in the center of the roof, filled with pitch-black oil. This sticky heavy oil had been specially processed to not only burn for a long time, but also did not emit a stench or smoke. It was the most suitable fuel for the torch. Your Majesty. Nightingale handed a torch to Roland. Roland nodded, took the torch, and slowly walked to the stone basin. He seemed to hear a gentle song and a familiar line in his mind. From the beginning of the first life underwater, you have experienced a lot. He raised the corner of his mouth and lowered the torch. Chapter 1202. In the Sedimentation Bay of the Kingdom of Wolfheart. As one of the only two port cities in the Kingdom of Wolfheart, the docks here were always busy. Every day, there would be many peddlers from the inland who would send goods to the Shanghai ships to sell to other countries, or directly exchange for what they needed from the sea merchants. Therefore, the dock area was quite like a large market, with everything from furs to slaves. White sat in his carriage, bored, and listened to the chatter of the laborers beside him as he gazed in the direction of the sea. Ever since the war between Hermes and Grey Castle, the task of sending orphans to the Holy City had been suspended. White, who had lost his biggest source of income, had become much more miserable. However, the worst was yet to come. The order of the kingdom, which had been overthrown by the church, had not been restored after the war. Small conflicts between the lords continued. A coachman like White, who relied on his carriage business for a living, had basically lost his stable source of income, and had to come to the Sedimentation Bay to find a new job. Although the prosperity of the city was affected to a certain extent, fortunately, the lords did not give up on their pursuit of enjoyment. Moreover, the main road across the Cage Mountain was controlled by the Duncan family, and the luxuries that the other lords wanted were more dependent on sea transportation. Therefore, the city was still as prosperous as before the war. Of course, this also had to do with the fact that the Baron of the Sedimentation Bay had always been neutral. White had also chosen this place for the sake of stability. He was getting old and did not want to travel around anymore. After a few more shipments, he would be able to buy a house in the outer city. At that time, he would be able to make a living by doing some small business. "Uncle, haven't you got any work today?" Suddenly, a young laborer climbed into his carriage with a smile. "Go away. It's none of your business whether I got any work or not." White waved his hand as if he was shooing away a fly. "Don't get into my carriage. You can't afford to damage the axle." "Don't say that. I'm heavier than the goods. You can see it from here." The latter first patted his open belly, then lay down in the carriage. He picked up a straw at the bottom of the carriage and put it in his mouth. He looked around and asked, "What did you transport last time? Why is there a sour smell in it?" "If you don't get off, I'm going to beat you up," White said impatiently. This guy did not have a name. The other laborers all called him Smarty, but he did not know why. The two of them had nothing to do with each other. They were just busy working at the same dock, and had met each other a few times. "With that fake leg of yours that hurts so much that you can't even stand properly on rainy days? It looks like it's going to rain again. Your bones are aching now, aren't they?" White couldn't help but choke. This annoying brat, when did he? Hee, don't stare at me like you're going to eat me alive. I'm here to help you find work. Smarty shrugged. There's only so much cargo to transport on a ship. You're old, and you can't squeeze past others, so naturally, you earn less. What are you trying to say? It's very simple. My brothers can help you get a good spot. It's much more useful than you doing it alone. Are you interested? You won't be working for nothing, White sneered. 10% of the freight. That's fair, right? Smarty smiled. He was silent for a moment. At this moment, the sky above them was a little gloomy. The sea breeze made the corners of their clothes flutter. It was obvious that a heavy rain was coming. If a ship arrived at the port at this time, it would indeed be difficult for him to steal business from others in the same line. The fake leg was both a hindrance to him and a reason for the employers to screen him out. Seeing that White didn't answer, Smarty snapped his fingers. Since you're not refusing, I'll take that as a yes. After a while, White stared at him and said, I'm not the only one you're helping, am I right? Ahem, if everyone can line up, we can save a lot of trouble, can't we? Smarty deliberately ignored the question. Uncle, can't you change the straw into cloth cushions for this carriage? Apart from the chaos drinks from the fjords, the most valuable thing in the Sedimentation Bay is perfume. Although the buyers are all nobles and usually bring their own carriages, accidents happen to every family, and there's always a need for additional carriages. But your car stinks. Even if we help you get a good seat, the employer might not agree to it. Glancing at the guy who spoke with confidence and composure, White suddenly understood why he was called a smart guy. However, he was not someone to be trifled with. By the way, didn't you ask me what I did last time? What? Cow dung, the kind that's used as firewood, he said slowly. Although they've all been dried, it's normal for them to leave some residue after they've been exposed to moisture. Smarty's face suddenly stiffened. He turned his head and spat out the straw in his mouth. He then lay on the carriage frame and coughed. Puffed, he's just a kid after all. White snorted and looked at the sea again. Then he froze. Several three-masted ships appeared at the end of his sight, slowly sailing towards the sedimentation bay. Each of them was a flagship of the fjord's Chamber of Commerce. The main mast was about 30 meters long, and there was a golden flag with a black border on the top of the mast. That was not the emblem of any of the chambers of commerce that White was familiar with. Anyway, as long as there were ships, there would be business. It did not matter which ship he was working for. Besides, there were 3 ships coming at once. Even if he did not ask for help from these laborers, he should be able to get 1 or 2 carts of goods. White jumped off the carriage frame and untied the horse's rope. When he was about to lead the horse to the unloading area, Smarty suddenly reached out and grabbed his clothes. Hey, something's wrong. What could be wrong? White turned his head impatiently, and what he saw left him dumbfounded. Behind the 3 ships, many masts were revealed bit by bit. The raised sails vaguely connected together, forming a white wall on the surface of the sea. Oh my God! When the grayish-black hulls entered his field of vision, they almost covered the original appearance of the sea. At first, White tried to count how many ships there were, but after counting to 50, he found that his eyes could not keep up with the speed of the ship's appearance. 100? 200? No, I'm afraid it's a lot more. Among them, there was no lack of huge 3-masted ships, but there were more paddle steamers emitting white smoke. He had occasionally seen these new ships without sails, but now there were so many of them. It was completely beyond his imagination. He swore that even the sailors who lived in the harbor had never seen such a huge fleet. Other people in the harbor also noticed this incredible scene. Whether it was the peddlers, sailors, or laborers, they could not help but put down the work in their hands and held their breath as they watched the mighty fleet approaching. The originally noisy dock suddenly quieted down. As the ships approached, the fluttering flags became clearer. On the golden background, White could vaguely see the emblem of a tower and a spear. All the ships were flying the same flag. When hundreds of emblems fluttered in the wind and formed a new sea line antenna, anyone could feel the majesty contained in it. Smarty sucked in a cold breath. Is this the flag of Grey Castle? White murmured in disbelief. You mean the king of Grey Castle is here? As the sedimentation bay could not accommodate so many large ships, most of the ships lowered their sails outside the harbor, while the 10 steam-powered ships sailed straight into the harbor. As soon as they reached the shore, a group of people in uniforms of the same color rushed out from the gangplank, quickly assembled into several rows on the trestles, and marched neatly into the harbor. These people were expressionless, but their eyes were chilling. They looked like seasoned warriors, but they did not have the arrogance that they showed on the outside. White swallowed his saliva. Although he had never seen such a team before, he felt a heartfelt fear in his heart. He knew that he was not the only one who felt this way. These outsiders quickly occupied every pier, but no one dared to raise any objections. White realized that this fleet was not here for business. The atmosphere on the harbor seemed to freeze. Chapter 1203. Damn the weather, Baron Jean Bates said in a low voice as he stood by the window and looked at the cloudy sky. It's going to rain again. The sedimentation bay, which was close to the sea, had no shortage of rainwater, especially in the summer and autumn. It was common for the sky to be blue one moment and stormy the next. Therefore, the city had prepared everything from flagstone roads to underground drainage facilities. Unlike Broken Tooth Castle or Greystone City, where a rainstorm could turn the lowlands into puddles, the place was muddy. 1 or 2 heavy rains would at most delay the unloading of merchant ships, but the impact on the city was almost negligible. It was more about his mood than the weather. Unfortunately, the dark clouds would dissipate after the heavy rain, but his mood would not. "My lord, have you thought about what to say to them?" Zom, the clerk, asked cautiously. "Answer?" Baron sneered. "You have to choose between being hanged or burned to death. What will you say?" The clerk was speechless. "You don't have a choice? Keep delaying it." "But—" He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he could not say anything. In fact, even if he did not say anything, Jinbei knew that it would be difficult to delay the matter forever. Just like the clouds and rain in the sky, no matter how much the merchants did not want to see it, they would fall eventually. The reason for all this was the war with the church. After the destruction of the kingdom of Wolfheart, a large number of illegitimate children of the Wolf King emerged overnight. The lords formed factions and fought against each other, as if they were the rightful rulers. After a series of battles, 3 major forces gradually formed: the Token family in the northwest, the Redstone Gate family in the south, and the Tusk family in the east. The former did not cause any trouble to the Sedimentation Bay due to their distance, but the latter two were different. Both dukes wanted to draw the Sedimentation Bay to their side and further expand their power. In the early stage of the war, Baron insisted on maintaining a neutral position in the port and did not offend any party. This not only helped the city recover its prosperity quickly, but also brought him a lot of income. To ensure that the goods could be exchanged for food or the Golden Dragon in time, the 2 dukes did not force him too much. But after a new round of annexation and expansion, the Tusk and Redstone Gate gradually stood out and became the strongest competitors for the new Alpha. Moreover, the Toxkin family suddenly closed the Cage Mountain, so the 2 families set their sights on the Sedimentation Bay again. Baron could guess what they were up to even if he used his knees. Taking over the Sedimentation Bay and stopping the enemy's trade would give them a great advantage in this competition. Thus, this time, not only did they send an emissary, but they also brought along a few dozen knight and hundreds of mercenaries. Their attitude was self-evident. The harbor only had a patrol team to maintain order, as well as a group of personal guards to protect the suzerain's safety. They could deal with the pirates who were not wearing any clothes, but against a fully armed knight, they had no ability to protect themselves. Jinbei did not plan to resist. If the 3 great powers had already determined the winner, and the Wolf King had been decided, he would pledge his loyalty without hesitation. As for whether the new Wolf King came from the old Wolf King's bloodline, he didn't care. However, Redstone Gate and Fong were evenly matched. Defecting to either of them was a dead end. No matter which side he chose to side with, the other side would never sit back and watch as they lost the sea trade. That meant that they had to rely on their own production of food, ironware, and other resources, while the other side would have an endless supply of supplies. Therefore, if he defected to either side, he would definitely be attacked by the other side. The Sedimentation Bay did not have an indestructible city wall or a deep moat. To defend itself, he could only rely on the full support of the side that defected to him. But would the 2 families really support him? Baron dared not take the risk. If he were the Duke of Redstone Gate or the Tusk Gate, he would naturally think of using the people of the Sedimentation Bay to weaken the attackers, and then launching a pincer attack. This would effectively reduce the casualties of the elite knight. He could even let the enemies enter the city and block the way out, slowly exhausting them. After all, the other side wanted the Sedimentation Bay, not the people. In other words, the Sedimentation Bay would be better without Jinbei. As mentioned before, it was a matter of choosing to be hanged or burned to death. By placing the 2 emissary groups in the same camp, he hoped to make use of their hostility to buy time. It would be even better if they started fighting. He even provided them with liquor and women several times and deliberately let them choose together. Unfortunately, they never drew their swords against each other even though they fought fiercely. Drip drip. The rain finally fell, and the garden of the governor's mansion became hazy as if it was covered by a thin layer of gauze. Staring at the gently swaying petals in the rain, Baron remained silent. Waiting like this was not the solution, but he could not think of a way to remain neutral. His grandfather often said that the nobles often wavered between interests and power. As long as he made good use of this, he would be able to benefit from both sides. Perhaps he should calm down, give up those petty tricks, and think about how to get out of this predicament from a strategic perspective. At this moment, the sound of hurried footsteps interrupted his thoughts. Sir, bad news. What are you panicking for? Let's talk this out. Jean Bate glared at the person who came. What's wrong? Did the knight finally start fighting? If that was the case, it would be good news. He stared at the guard's mouth, hoping to read the word camp or knights from the movement of his lips. The fleet of the King of Greycastle. Greycastle has occupied the harbor. However, the guard's words were completely beyond his imagination, and he could not react for a moment. Not only that, they also blocked the dock area and forbade anyone from approaching. What did you say? Greycastle? Baron repeated subconsciously. Do they want to buy or sell something? Wait, did you just say blocked? Yes. The guard said anxiously. They drove away the ships that were docked by the pier and only allowed their own ships to dock. They also said that this was a temporary requisition, and that order would be restored soon. The patrol tried to stop them, but they were disarmed in the blink of an eye. According to the report, there are hundreds of Greycastle ships outside the harbor. Jean Bate could not believe it. Are you sure it's the fleet of the King of Greycastle? Not the family emblem of a certain lord? Yes, I saw it with the telescope. The guard nodded with difficulty. It's indeed the flag of the royal family of Greycastle with a tower and a spear. Dear God, is Greycastle planning to invade the kingdom of Wolfheart? Why would Wimbledon give up the rich neighboring country and make a detour to me? Even if the King of Greycastle wanted to expand his territory, he did not have to launch an attack from the sea, did he? Could the Duncan family really resist the Greycastle army that defeated the church? No, it did not make sense at all. For a moment, Baron's mind was in a mess, and he could not make sense of it at all. Until Zoom, the clerk, walked up to him and whispered something in his ear. Baron's eyes suddenly lit up. Yes, this might be the opportunity he had been waiting for. There was no doubt that Greycastle was powerful enough to break the stalemate between the two powers. Assuming that this fleet was really here to expand the territory of the King of Greycastle, no matter how strong they were, they would need the help of the local nobles when they first arrived in this strange land. With a little guidance, they might be able to drive the wolves to devour the tigers. Anyway, it did not matter who he was loyal to. If he expressed his loyalty to the King of Greycastle, he might be able to gain more power and become a guardian. Even if Wimbledon failed, he would not lose anything. At this moment, another guard ran in and said, Your Excellency, the Greycastle fleet has sent a messenger. He said that he has come bearing the decree of His Majesty Roland Wimbledon. He hopes to discuss it with you. Chapter 1204. Anytime. The guard was stunned. What if it's now? Of course. This was not a polite answer. According to the rules, he should let the other party rest for a day or two before holding a sumptuous banquet. If not, he should at least set a time, such as at night. After all, the other party represented the King of Greycastle, so it was reasonable for him to be serious. However, Baron did not want to wait any longer. If it were not for the fact that it was raining outside, he would have taken the initiative to go to the dock to have a look. Without a doubt, such a large fleet would definitely attract the attention of the envoys of Tusk and Redstone Gate. If they got in touch with the other party first, things would get complicated. By the way, Jean Bate hurriedly said to the guard, Tell the people of Greycastle about the other two families. Tell them that I'm the only one who can make decisions in the sedimentation bay. Yes, sir. After the guard left, Baron suddenly regretted his decision. Perhaps he should not have said any time. What if the other party followed the etiquette and came 1 or 2 days later? At the end of the day, it was all because of the trace of self-esteem at the bottom of his heart. He should have been more straightforward. The rain came at this time of all times. It was as if the rain was against him. Baron looked at the heavy rain outside the window and fell into a dilemma. However, the guard came back faster than he expected. It took him less than half an hour, and he brought him a piece of delightful news. Sir, they're here. Jean Bate suddenly stood up from his seat. Quick, bring them to my parlor. Very soon, Baron met the guests of Grey Castle in the parlor of the governor's mansion. There were only 10 people in total. Half of them were probably guards, standing outside the door. The rest of them were dressed more formally. They were probably clerical assistants. The one sitting in the middle should be the representative of the King of Grey Castle. He noticed that the coats they took off and hung on the wall seemed to be waterproof. Even though it was raining heavily outside, there were no traces of wetness on their bodies. Furthermore, the coat was bright in color. It was neither leather nor felt, so it was obviously a good item. It seemed that the rumor that Grey Castle had produced many strange objects in recent years was true. However, when he looked carefully at the person in charge, he frowned inwardly. He was clearly a Majin clan member. Such barbarians usually appeared in slave markets. How did they become the upper nobles of Grey Castle? However, the Baron did not show his surprise on his face. He put on a warm smile and spread his arms. I'm the Lord of the Sedimentation Bay, Baron Jean Bate. As you can see, this city is prosperous and beautiful, very suitable as a place to rest after a long voyage. May I know why all of you have come from afar? Even if the other party was a duke, he should still be able to accept it with a smile. However, the Majin remained expressionless. I'm Iron Axe, the commander of His Majesty's First Army and the person in charge of this expedition. Let's skip the formalities and make a long story short. The Kingdom of Everwinter and the Kingdom of Wolfheart are likely to become bloody battlefields. I'm here on behalf of His Majesty Roland Wimbledon, the King of Grey Castle, the chief of the Majin clan and the ruler of the Fertile Plains. What's going on? For a moment, Jean Bate doubted his own ears. Great Chief? What kind of title is that? Where is the Fertile Plains? Putting aside these details, does he mean that the Kingdom of Everwinter and the Kingdom of Wolfheart will become a battlefield by force? Why did he say that at the beginning? Shouldn't he say that after I refuse? But he has not asked me whether I agree or not. The clerk continued. Excuse me, is the First Army the one that defeated the church? Yes, the Majin nodded. Sir Iron Axe, of course we don't want the war to spread to this land, but it's not up to the Sedimentation Bay to decide. There will always be people who want more. If you can convince them, the Kingdom of Wolfheart won't become a battlefield. Good job, Baron thought. In this way, I can naturally drag the other two families into this mess. He pretended to be regretful and nodded. He looked at Iron Axe, but unexpectedly saw a trace of sarcasm on his face. It's not up to you whether it will become a battlefield or not. When the enemy comes, the entire human race will fight for it. In fact, the war has already begun. In a place you don't know, Iron Axe said calmly. I think you've more or less heard some rumors about the church, the divine will, and the invasion of foreign tribes. Jean Bate was stunned. As the lord of the harbor, he had indeed heard similar things. Sea merchants had been to many places, and there were bound to be some strange things. However, these were only topics of conversation at the dinner table. It was inappropriate to bring it up in a formal diplomatic occasion. However, Iron Axe's tone was not sarcastic at all. Could it be? Yes, it's all true, Iron Axe said word by word. Outside the window, there was a rumble of thunder. Wow, are these people made of iron? Smarty exclaimed as he leaned on the fence of the stable and looked in the direction of the dock. Even iron will rust. I don't think they're human at all. After wiping the rain off the horse's back, White finally had time to tidy up his wet clothes. No normal person would deliberately get wet in the rain. Only idiots and lunatics are exceptions. In just over half an hour, hundreds of people from the ship had quickly taken control of the entire port. The peddlers had all evacuated before the storm started, but they did the opposite. They set up tents one after another in the middle of the empty space. In the blink of an eye, the dark green tents covered more than half of the dock. In addition, the Grey Castle people also piled up obstacles at the intersection and higher places. Some thick and solid metal pipes were set up. They did not look like weapons, otherwise they would not have been exposed to the rain. However, looking at the cold, black reflections, White always felt uneasy. There were people stationed in front of each of these checkpoints. Although they had put on rain cloaks that covered their whole bodies, it was impossible to keep the rain out in such weather. The sea breeze that swept past the port from time to time would blow the rain away, and it was easy for the rain to pour into the gaps of their collars and cuffs. White could already imagine how their clothes would look like when they were soaked. It must be a terrible feeling. The sedimentation bay was humid and rainy, and the local lord had set up many temporary shelters in the dock area. However, these people did not seem to care. They did not even look at them, let alone take shelter from the rain. With their pitch-black cloaks, they looked like towering stones in the rain. The people of Grey Castle have gone crazy, White muttered in his heart. Hey, that's strange, Smarty suddenly said in a low voice. What's wrong? White asked impatiently. Look at the ship they're using to transport the goods. And then look at those outside the port, he pointed and said. They're all three-masted ships, but the draft is so different. Draft? What do you mean? Just take it as a standard for how much cargo they're carrying, Smarty said, waving his hand. Even though they've unloaded so much cargo, their draft is still much deeper than those outside. It's hard to understand. Why are the people of Grey Castle doing this? Are they just trying to create a scene? What the hell are you talking about? White said impatiently. What I'm trying to say is, those ships might be empty, Smarty said in a low voice. When Iron Axe stopped talking, Jeanbait finally recovered from his disbelief. He had heard about the long history of the war between humans and demons. Every 400 years, they would come back, and this time, the demons might launch an attack from the border of the impassable mountain range. Are you sure? If he remembered correctly, to the north of the kingdom of Everwinter was a towering mountain range, like a precipice rising from the ground. Attacking from there? Are you kidding me? I'm not sure, so we sent out a scouting team to make sure nothing goes wrong. Iron Axe shrugged. But no matter which direction the demons invade from, it won't make any difference. If we don't gather all our forces, the border of this narrow continent will be engulfed in a sea of fire. Humans will cease to exist. Baron had a strange feeling of floating, as if he were in a dream even though he was sitting in the parlor. Not only him, but the clerk and the guards also seemed to feel the same way. Ahem, okay, I'll take what you said as the truth. After a while, Jeanbait cleared his throat and said, Then why did the king of Grey Castle send you to the kingdom of Wolfheart? If he wants to fight the demons, shouldn't he go to the kingdom of Everwinter? Of course, the kingdom of Everwinter is also in the plan. You don't have to worry about it. Our purpose here is very simple. We want to take away as many people as possible who might be affected by the war. Freedmen, slaves, refugees, and vagabonds are all on the list. Iron Axe paused. The only exception is the nobles. It's up to you whether you want to leave or not. If you fully cooperate with the First Army, when we leave, everything here, including your property, your territory, your title, will belong to you. If you stop us, Baron swallowed hard. Chapter 1205. Jeanbait did not want to become the enemy of the King of Grey Castle. Although he had never really interacted with the people of Grey Castle, he had heard many rumors about them. The God's Punishment Army, which had swept through the kingdom of Wolfheart and the kingdom of Everwinter, had been defeated by Grey Castle. The allied forces formed by the nobles of the Kingdom of Dawn had been routed within a day. Roland Wimbledon had been invincible in the kingdom, and had unified the entire kingdom within half a year. It was even rumored that Grey Castle had played a role in the recent incident on the Archduke Island. He had thought that these rumors were shocking enough, but he did not expect that the First Army had been fighting with demons of foreign races for the past year. If it had been another lord who claimed this, he would have scoffed at it. However, when it came from the commander-in-chief of the First Army, Baron found that he did not dare to express his doubts. Of course, no one from the sedimentation bay was qualified to test it out. The problem was that the plan of the King of Grey Castle was too grand, or rather, too whimsical. If the king only wanted the throne of the kingdom of Wolfheart, Jeanbait would not hesitate to submit to him. But the truth was that the other party wanted to empty the population of the two kingdoms. Just listen to what this commander-in-chief said. Advancing from multiple routes, with both land and sea transportation going at the same time. First the villages, then the towns. It really seemed like they wouldn't stop until they had moved everything. Most nobles did not care too much about the lives of their subjects, as long as their deaths were worthwhile, or could be exchanged for sufficient benefits. But moving all of them away was a different matter. That meant that the territory would be empty, the food would not be harvested, the taxes would fall to the bottom, and no one would take care of the industry. Unless everything was irreversible, they would not easily agree to it. No matter how powerful the first army was, it would be difficult for them to fight against all the nobles at the same time, right? After all, this wasn't Grey Castle. Without the support of the locals, the burden of marching and logistics would be greatly increased. Yet they still wanted to split up their forces. It was as if they were treating the nobles of the two countries as heir. After a long silence, Jean Bate said in a low voice, "I don't quite understand why the king of Grey Castle must do this. In case the demons do not intend to cross the impassable mountain range to attack, we can support them here. But once the people are gone, the cities, farmlands, and mines will all become barren. Such a loss is truly incalculable." "I can't answer your question. As the commander-in-chief of the First Army, my only task is to complete the task assigned by His Majesty." But Iron Axe paused for a moment. "As long as you go to Neverwinter in person, you should be able to get the answer." "Well, then I only have one last question." Baron licked his dry lips. "You said before that the nobles are all voluntary. What if I decide to go with you?" Iron Axe nodded and pointed to the civil servant beside him. "This is Remy, the Migration Personnel Officer of the Administrative Office of Neverwinter. He'll tell you what His Majesty wants." "Greetings, Mr. Baron. You are now a member of the Grey Castle Kingdom." The personnel officer quickly flipped through the documents in his hands. "First of all, we can be sure that His Majesty Roland Wimbledon is a kind and generous king. He will not mistreat anyone who has contributed to Grey Castle. Since Grey Castle has abolished the system of feudal nobles and unified the laws throughout the kingdom, you will lose the right to inherit and enfeoffment your land. But as an experienced administrator, you can join the administrative office and become the governor of a region. Or you can help His Majesty develop a new territory, such as the Fertile Plains. Of course, if the demons don't invade the Four Kingdoms, you can continue to manage the Sedimentation Bay. If you're lucky, the area you're in charge of may be many times larger than it is now. After all, not every noble would make such a choice." The document was very long, and it took almost a quarter of an hour for the clerk to stop. He had considered all aspects of the situation, so it was obviously not made up in a short time. Jean Bate realized that the person who had written this document must be an extremely capable minister. He could never write such a comprehensive document. In short, the content of the document was to exchange short-term benefits for long-term benefits. As long as he performed well, he could get far more than a harbor lord. As for whether the two were worth it, it was a question that varied from person to person. In the face of an unknown future, it was unwise to make a hasty decision. However, when the situation was bad enough, the choice was not so important. Compared to being hanged or burned to death, at least there was a way to survive in the future. Moreover, a large-scale population transfer was not something that could be completed in a year or two. During this period, he could still stay as the Lord of the Sedimentation Bay without worrying about the other two families. Jean Bate took a deep breath and said, "I'm willing to join the King of Grey Castle and serve his kingdom." "Wise choice." Iron Axe's expression did not change, as if he had already expected this result. "Then from now on, you can mobilize the people in the surrounding area to move. We have a special team in charge of this, and they'll give you the most suitable advice." "So soon?" Baron was surprised. "Yes, I won't stay here for too long. The First Army will continue to march into the interior of the Kingdom of Wolfheart in 3 days at most." But Jean Bate hesitated and finally said through gritted teeth, "The Tuscan Redstone Gate Knight may not allow me to do this. They may not dare to openly oppose Grey Castle, but there are only a few patrols in the Sedimentation Bay. They can easily interfere with my orders." This was a little embarrassing. After all, an hour ago, he had said that he was the only one who could make decisions in the Sedimentation Bay. However, Baron knew that he had to bring this up now. Otherwise, if the other two families knew that he had pledged allegiance to Grey Castle, and that the sedimentation bay was open to them, they might secretly cause trouble. At the same time, this was also a test. If the other two families did not seem to care, then his previous promise would be greatly disregarded. However, Iron Axe's answer was beyond his expectations. The sedimentation bay is one of the key hubs of the migration plan. There can't be any accidents. Even if the First Army leaves, I'll leave 100 soldiers here. The Majins nodded to one of their attendants, who quickly left the parlor. Also, before I arrived here, I had a certain understanding of the situation in the Kingdom of Wolfheart. As I said before, you can't obstruct us by openly opposing us. You can also obstruct us by secretly plotting against us. In order to prevent the latter from affecting the efficiency of the migration plan, we often take some proactive measures to dispel their hopes. You mean? It's better to see it with my own eyes than to talk about it, Iron Axe said as he stood up. Don't worry. The threat you're worried about will soon be gone. The rain doesn't show any signs of letting up, Smarty said as he stretched his hand out of the straw shed of the stable and felt the rain falling from the edge of the shed. So, White said as he hammered his sore leg, why are you still here? I don't want to get soaked. Besides, the Lord built this shed for everyone. I can stay here as long as I want. He turned around and made a face. You. The old coachman was speechless. This damn brat. If I don't teach him a lesson, he won't know how to respect his elders. When White got up and was about to slap him, he suddenly noticed a group of people from Grey Castle leaving their station. Even in the heavy rain, these hundreds of people lined up neatly in 2 columns. Their hurried footsteps created a series of splashes on the stone pavement. The most eye-catching thing was the things they carried on their backs. They were all metal pipes of different lengths and thicknesses, glowing with a cold light. Just like the black tools set up in the sentry post, they gave off an ominous feeling. Looking at the backs of these people gradually disappearing in the rain, White suddenly realized where this ominous feeling came from. Regardless of the length or thickness, those metal pipes did not look like something a blacksmith could make. A creation that was beyond the power of man itself meant that it was extraordinary. The other people who took shelter from the rain also noticed this scene, and there was a burst of whispers in the straw shed. Unexpectedly, White did not hear Smarty's muttering. Chapter 1206. The campsite of the Redstone Gate and the Tusk family was located on the main road outside the city. It used to be a temporary inn for mercenaries and caravans, but now it was used by the diplomatic mission. Because it was near the sedimentation bay, it was almost impossible to encounter any danger. Therefore, there was only a low wooden fence around the inn, and there was no entrance guard. Moreover, the only force that could pose a threat to the diplomatic mission was the other diplomatic mission. Therefore, the two parties did not intend to guard each other's campsite. They even used spears and shields to separate the two parties in the center of the inn to show which camp belonged to which side. Of course, most people knew that the dividing line was just a symbol. As long as the Lord of the Sedimentation Bay did not make a decision, the two diplomatic missions would not completely fall out with each other. Therefore, the sentries were just for show, not to mention that it was raining heavily outside. Therefore, when the 100 soldiers of the First Army approached 200 meters away from the inn, the two families still did not notice them. It was not until the knight's voice pierced through the curtain of rain and resounded above the campsite that the knight realized the situation had changed. This is the First Army of Grey Castle, which has officially taken over the Sedimentation Bay. According to the law of Neverwinter, your current behavior constitutes illegal occupation and armed interference. You have 15 minutes to disarm and surrender. Otherwise, we'll take coercive measures, and you'll be responsible for all the consequences. If he had to describe it in one word, it would be inexplicable. The commander of the Tusk diplomatic mission opened the curtain and saw a man standing outside the fence, holding a strange cylinder and shouting loudly. Not far away, there was indeed a hanging flag with a faintly discernible different-colored emblem on it. It was definitely not a common family emblem in the Kingdom of Wolfheart. However, he could not associate the sudden appearance of the 100 soldiers with Grey Castle. To him, Grey Castle was a distant and strange country that usually only appeared in various rumors. The other soldiers were covered in cloaks, and the rain beat down mercilessly on them. They looked pathetic from afar. In addition, the sparse team was clamoring to forcefully disarm 700 to 800 people, which deepened this unrealistic feeling. The commander walked downstairs and found that the mercenaries on the first floor were crowding by the window, using extremely vulgar language to curse the other party's maternal relatives, and making all kinds of obscene gestures. If it wasn't for the rain outside, and no one wanted to get wet, they would have probably spat on the face of the person who was shouting. Well, at least they're worthy of their lowly origins, the leader thought with some schadenfreude. However, as a noble, he had to consider things more thoroughly. For example, what if the other party was really someone from Grey Castle? Perhaps he should first observe the reaction of his old enemy, Redstone Gate. After all, this group of people's request was to disarm and surrender. He couldn't really give such an order. Moreover, if he was the only one who sent his subordinates to negotiate, he felt that he was at a disadvantage. Since the two sides were so far apart, the commander didn't have to worry about the other party suddenly launching an attack. The mercenaries had already taken out their weapons, and there was not a single horse in the team of the cloaked man, which was enough for his subordinates to get ready. As time passed by, he completely ignored the First Army's warning, or rather, he didn't even realize the threat in the warning. For the nobles in the kingdom of Wolfheart, fighting was a time-consuming and clear process. They had to observe the enemy, make decisions, give orders, and form a formation to fight the enemy step by step. Even the powerful Church of Hermes couldn't break away from this category. It could be said that the First Army, which had been baptized by demons, was already on a different level from these nobles in terms of consciousness. The battle broke out so suddenly that almost no one could react in time. After a quarter of an hour, the first to open fire were the 4 mortars. They had completely replaced the heavy and inconvenient old front-mounted field artillery. Although they were not as powerful as the Longsong cannons, they were more than enough to destroy simple fortifications and wooden sentry towers. Because they could be disassembled and carried, the soldiers were full of trust in these weapons and often used them as attack horns during the War for Unification. The courier station 200 meters away was instantly turned into ashes, and the curses of the emissary delegation were also drowned in the roar of the cannonballs. The wooden houses could not withstand the attacks of the mortars, and the air currents generated by the explosions tore the pillars, doors, and windows. After several rounds of bombardment, the houses in the camp directly collapsed. The commander of the First Army gave the order to charge. Everyone quickly surrounded the courier station with their guns in hand. More enemies were behind the barracks, but the two families did not organize any effective counterattack. A small cluster of fearless mercenaries had just rushed out from behind the smoke, when they were shot down by a barrage of gunshots. In order to avoid being shot in the back, the First Army waited outside the courier station until the smoke and dust were suppressed by the heavy rain before they climbed over the fence and continued to advance. Every soldier was very cautious when they fired, not because they were merciful, but because they all knew that His Majesty's mine needed more workers. At the same time, the voices of persuasion rang out again. This time, most people chose to comply. The exchange of gunfire ended as quickly as it started. In less than 30 minutes, the threat that had put Baron in a dilemma was no longer there. After returning to the governor's mansion, Jean Bate still could not recover from the fierce battle. Although he had a psychological expectation of the strength of Grey Castle, he did not expect them to be so strong, to the extent that it was not a conventional battle at all. At this moment, Baron finally understood what Iron Axe meant when he said, "Seeing is more intuitive than saying." As a witness, it was difficult for him to describe what he had seen. If he had to describe it, he would say that it was an unusual kind of feast for the eyes. The people of Grey Castle carried out every action in silence in the rain, without any unnecessary words or communication. This kind of silence formed a sharp contrast with the deafening explosions, almost more impressive than the weapons they used. What on earth did these people go through to get to where they are today? Now do you believe that we can defend the sedimentation bay? Iron Axe's voice interrupted his thoughts. Jean Bate found that he could only nod and say nothing. Relax, Iron Axe said with a rare smile. You don't have to be afraid of the power of the First Army, especially after you've decided to serve His Majesty. Anyone who attacks the sedimentation bay is tantamount to a violation of His Majesty's dignity. This is no longer a problem for you alone. Don't forget, you're a member of Grey Castle now. A member of Grey Castle? What a strange way of saying it. Baron thought to himself. He had lived in the kingdom of Wolfheart for so many years, but he had never felt that he had anything to do with the kingdom. However, from the tone of the commander-in-chief of the First Army, it seemed that the two were naturally connected. He did not quite understand the reason, but he found that he did not dislike this way of saying it. Chapter 1207. It had to be said that the Baron of Sedimentation Bay acted quickly. Not only did he allocate half of the rooms in the governor's mansion for the army to use, but he also mobilized a group of maids to serve the army. However, Iron Axe refused to let them in because he did not want them to leak the secret. Looking at the few young people in the staff who had a reluctant look on their faces, he said expressionlessly, "It's time to work. Let's get moving. Don't forget that your performance will be recorded and reviewed by Edith Kant. If you make any mistakes, you should know the consequences." At the mention of the Pearl of the Northern Region, everyone shuddered and immediately got to work. Map, I'll hang the map. What about the itinerary? I'll check it again. Who's going to check the amount of rations with me? The room immediately became very lively. Young people are so energetic. Remy shook his head with a smile. Baron has a good eye. I'm afraid he's already seen through these people. It's just a common tactic of the nobles. Iron Axe frowned. It's best if he can spend as much time on the migration. Don't worry, the administrative office will follow up and supervise him. Remy patted his chest and said, "Anyway, the first springboard is successfully taken. The process is smoother than I expected. In a sense, the Tusk and Redstone Gate families have helped us, but the next step may not be so easy." "No, there's no difference," Iron Axe interrupted. Is that so?" The latter was startled. "Because they've fallen behind the times." After that, he looked out of the window. The rain clouds were dispersing, and a small patch of blue appeared in the gloomy sky. "Because they've fallen behind the times." This was what Edith said to him a week before the departure. But this time they did not meet in private. Instead, she invited him into the General Staff's office and arranged for him to take the meeting minutes. The topic of discussion was how to efficiently complete His Majesty's population migration plan. They're not aware of the changes in the outside world. All their eyes are fixed on the wealth in their hands. They have no imagination and boast that they're good at calculating gains and losses. Most nobles are like that. If I'm not wrong, you're going to fight them one by one, right? If they hinder His Majesty's plan. Too slow. Edith said bluntly. This operation is different from the Unification War of Grey Castle. We need to station troops in unfamiliar territories to ensure that the migration route is smooth, and the number of available soldiers will be constantly diluted. Even if we win in the end, the whole plan will take a long time, Edith said bluntly. Secondly, the power of Grey Castle may make them not dare to confront you head-on, and the plan behind you may not be exposed immediately. If you wait until they cause substantial damage before taking action, you will appear blind, and it will damage His Majesty's dignity. Then what should we do? Confirm the target in advance, and just pull one group to fight against another. Edith handed over a form to her. The screen was filled with options with +1 and +2 marks at the back. What is this? It was the first time Iron Axe had seen such a special form. Threat assessment form? Rebel classification manual? At any rate, it wasn't important what it was called. This was something that I wrote based on the psychology of nobles. The criteria for reference included gender, heir, size of territory, number of troops, daily activities, and so on. All you need to do is fill in the relevant information, and you will get a rough result. The more information you have, the better it will be for you to make a decision. Since the situation in the Kingdom of Wolfheart and the Kingdom of Everwinter has changed greatly, the General Staff cannot complete this part of the work for you. If you encounter someone not on the list, Just calculate according to the form. What about after the calculation? Iron Axe asked as he browsed through the form. Those below 50 can be roped in. Their strength is mediocre and their ambition is limited. However, these nobles can do a lot of things. You can get the local map information, the distribution of towns, and the details of the population. More importantly, with the support of the local lord, the migration work can reach the highest efficiency, Edith explained. As for those higher than 50, she paused. They can be regarded as worthless, or not worth wasting time on. Whether the other party shows submission or not, we should take the initiative to attack and not give them any room for fantasy. Even Iron Axe was a little shocked when he heard this. He was not afraid of wiping out all the nobles who dared to resist his majesty, but in terms of methods and means, they were far inferior. The Pearl of the Northern region had determined the future of these nobles with just a list, even though she had never seen them or spoken to them. He was silent for a moment before he said, "Is the result accurate?" As the commander-in-chief of the First Army, Iron Axe naturally knew the importance of time and how much effort this form could save him. Most of the ships in the migration fleet were rented by His Majesty from the Chamber of Commerce at the fjords. Even if the demons did not intend to erect the obelisk in the impassable mountain range, the migration should be completed as soon as possible. I don't rule out the possibility of bias. Even setting the dividing line at 50 is just my personal opinion. Considering that time is precious, it's up to you to decide. Edith took a sip of tea unhurriedly. After all, the general staff is only responsible for providing opinions. Iron Axe turned to the last page, where there was a list of people who had come to a conclusion. The information should have come from the Kingdom of Dawn. The first person ranked below 50 was the Lord of the Sedimentation Bay, the first landing point of the fleet. Before leaving the office of the General Staff, Iron Axe asked her one last question. Are there no nobles who are not behind the times? Of course it's possible, Edith said with a smile, twirling her hair. But even without this form, I believe you'll be able to tell quickly. That person must look like me. Iron Axe sighed as he recalled the confident look on Edith's face. He gathered his thoughts and turned to the First Army. As the Pearl of the Northern region had said, the nobles were not the problem. What was difficult was the orderly and efficient migration of the people. However, only 2 days later, tens of thousands of migrants gathered at the dock area of the Sedimentation Bay. They were crowded outside the square, waiting to board the ship and set off. This number not only exceeded the expectations of Iron Axe and Remy, but also greatly surprised Baron Jean Bate. The First Army had to postpone the departure date to maintain the order of the migration. What's going on? Iron Axe asked Remy. Did you exaggerate His Majesty's promise in the propaganda? How could I dare to make a decision on my own? Remy shook his head. Everything is carried out according to the procedures summarized by the administrative office. The efficiency depends on the prestige of the instigator. It's not surprising if it's Neverwinter, but this Baron can't be compared to His Majesty at all. Therefore, the original plan was to transfer 300 to 500 people a day. But now the number has increased by more than 20 times, Iron Axe said with mixed feelings. Of course, the more the better, but it always made people a little uneasy when things went beyond the plan. He knew how difficult it was to convince these people to abandon their land and believe that danger was coming. Even if His Majesty promised them some compensation, Greycastle was still a very distant and strange place for the people of the Kingdom of Wolfheart. Now that so many migrants had suddenly appeared, it was hard not to wonder what was going on behind the scenes. If I have to say, there's one situation that might correspond to this, Remy said after thinking for a moment. That's the refugees. Because these people had nothing, as long as there was a glimmer of hope, they would pounce on it like moths to a flame. But they're all freedmen from the villages and towns near the Sedimentation Bay. Theoretically, yes, but my men heard a few interesting rumors. For example, the Redstone Gate family and Baron Bate have a feud, and they plan to conquer the Sedimentation Bay and enslave the surrounding people. Another rumor is that man-eating monsters have appeared in the northern hilly area. Some cities and towns were eaten overnight. and the skeletons were placed in the middle of the road. Now those monsters are spreading to the southeast. There were many similar rumors, and every one of them was very convincing, causing people to feel uneasy. I think this is probably the reason why there are so many migrants. If they can't wait to leave their homes, won't they be the same as the refugees? Iron Axe was stunned. When did the rumors start? At least a month and a half ago. At that time, we had just set off from Neverwinter. Remy touched his chin and said, "Should I say that we're really lucky?" Of course not. Iron Axe's face darkened. It was obvious that someone was adding fuel to the fire, and clearly knew the purpose of the First Army's trip. Who on earth spread these rumors? Why did they help Greycastle? Were they friends or enemies? A series of puzzling questions swarmed his mind, until a soldier interrupted his thoughts. "Sir, someone asked me to give you this letter." Who? Iron Axe temporarily suppressed the distracting thoughts, and took the letter. "He didn't write a name. It's a little guy," the soldier replied. "But he said that he's also delivering it. I guess the writer doesn't want others to see it. I've checked it, and there's nothing in it except a piece of paper." The envelope was made of ordinary linen, which was much cheaper than sheepskin or cowhide, and was commonly seen in civilian markets. The opening of the bag was not sealed with wax. It was left open and looked very casual. Iron Axe took out the piece of paper, and was surprised to find that it was completely black and hard and smooth. It was not something that ordinary people could afford. When he turned it over, there was only a line of small golden words on it. Chapter 1208. When the sun set, the temperature in the mountains dropped rapidly. "It's time to find a place to spend the night," Lightning thought. The temperature difference at the top of the impassable mountain was astonishing. After crossing the sea of clouds, the sunlight during the day seemed to be roasting people. If they did not cover their exposed skin, it was easy to be sunburned. Once night fell, the howling cold wind would quickly take away all the heat. If they slept on the treetops like they did in the misty forest, they would probably be frozen to death the next day. Therefore, it was necessary to find a shelter before the night completely enveloped the land. "Let's call it a day." Lightning took out the sigil of listening and said, "I'm going to find a shelter. Bring some food back." Maggie could not reply while flying, but she knew that Maggie had heard her call. Then she descended and flew close to the ground. Before setting off, Agatha had repeatedly told her to either fly very high or fly close to the ground when looking for traces of demons, and never change the route at will. Otherwise, once they strayed into the area affected by the God's Stone mine, no one would be able to save them. Lightning strictly followed this instruction. In this vast mountain range, no one could help her if anything happened. She had to take care of herself and Maggie at the same time. Because she had paid attention to possible hiding places during the previous search, she soon found a cave halfway up the mountain. The terrain here was like a stone forest, with tens of thousands of hills of almost the same height, densely packed together. Each hill was about the size of Neverwinter, and would not attract a second glance from the outside. But here, there was a wonderful change, as if the top of the hill had been carved by a big hand. The gaps between the hills had become natural waterways. When there was a rainstorm, the mountain torrents would sweep down with great force. More importantly, the climate on the high mountains changed drastically. It could be clear on one side, but lightning and thunder on the other. If inexperienced explorers chose to camp in the mountains for the sake of convenience, it was very likely that they would be washed away by a sudden flood in the middle of the night. Therefore, regardless of whether there was an ideal shelter from the wind or not, they had to choose a high place to stay. Ever since she entered this mountainous region known as the Ridge of the Continent, she had witnessed similar situations several times. In addition, the mountains here were also different from other places. Most of the time, the stone walls of the mountain peaks should be steep and sharp, but these small mountains were basically round, and even shaped like a soft couch. They were full of holes, as if they were not naturally formed rocks, but the appearance of some solidified liquid. Fortunately, they still retained the hardness of the stone, enough to support a shelter. This time, the cave was quite large, about 10 square meters. There were some weeds and branches scattered inside, probably left behind by birds and beasts when they built their nests. After confirming that there was no potential danger, Lightning informed Maggie of the location and began to tidy up the temporary residence. When the afterglow of the setting sun was replaced by darkness, Maggie, who had transformed into a snowy owl, returned to the cave. She shook her feathers and returned to her human form. She raised the bag in front of her chest as if she was presenting a gift. "Look what I found, Ku." Lightning took the bag and took out a pheasant and 4 large eggs from it. This was a rare harvest on the top of the impassable mountain. Even Maggie, who was experienced in hunting, might not be able to return with a full harvest every time. "Well done." Lightning patted her head, and in return, Maggie smiled proudly. Hee. The bonfire was soon lit. She used the silt deposited at the bottom of the mountain to form a stove to prevent the fire from being discovered. Then she covered the pheasant with the mud and put it into the fire. Finally, she covered it with the eggs. 30 minutes later, the dinner was completed. The two of them had used this cooking method many times in the concealing forest, so it could be considered as practice makes perfect. The moment the mud was cracked open, a rich aroma instantly rushed into their nostrils. The fat under the skin made the chicken glisten, and the spices that filled the stomach were completely stimulated by the roasting. Along with the steaming hot air, the meat melted into the whole body. After the soft skin was removed, what was left was a tender and delicious delicacy. Unlike the finished product that was directly roasted by the flame, the whole chicken was not burnt at all. The meat was as white as new, and when they tore it apart, they could see that it was still attached to the chicken. Together with the steamed eggs, the two of them ate very quickly. Even the chicken bones were not spared. Burp. Maggie let out a breath. Sure enough, food that you catch yourself is the most delicious, Ku. This guy, when they first met, clearly accused him of actually wanting to eat a bird. Lightning shook her head in amusement. "Did you find anything today? Other than food?" "Well, nothing, Ku. The landscape here is basically the same. If there are traces of demons, I will definitely find them, Ku." Sure enough, if the Godstone mine was buried deep underground, it would be too difficult to find clues from the air. She wondered where the Tequila's reinforcement fleet was now. If they could give her a general direction, it would be much better than searching blindly. Lightning suppressed her distracting thoughts and pointed to the inside of the cave. "In that case, go and be my bed." "Oh, got it, Ku." Maggie dragged her long white hair and walked to the designated position. She shook her body and turned into a ball of devil beast. Lightning put out the remaining fire and lay in her belly. Due to the size of the nest, the two of them had different ways of keeping warm. Compared to squeezing into each other's narrow sleeping bag, it was obviously more comfortable for Maggie to use her devil beast form to resist the cold wind. At least her belly was like a huge heater, which was enough to ensure that she would not wake up at night. However, this was not without its drawbacks. The skin of the devil beast was quite rough, and it could even be described as shaving. Lightning could not help but miss Lorger's fur. "Aren't you going to sleep?" Seeing that she took out the stone of lighting, Maggie turned her head and asked. "Well, I have to record today's route. It won't take long. You go to sleep first." "Okay," Maggie said in a low voice. After a while, she suddenly muttered, "You will always take me to explore in the future, right?" Lightning was startled, and then replied softly, "Of course. After Ashes is gone, I will take the responsibility of protecting you." After hearing the answer, Maggie finally closed her eyes. Lightning sat there for a long time before she took out her notebook from her waist bag. It was now the 10th day since they entered the northern mountains of the Kingdom of Everwinter, and they had searched a distance of about 120 kilometers. The deeper they went to the peak of the impassable mountain, the more she felt how small she was. In this place that no one had ever set foot on, she saw many indescribable sceneries, a vast mountainous forest that was like a fertile plain, an ice waterfall that dropped straight into the sea from the northeast, a sea of clouds that rose like stairs, and a huge rift in the middle of the continent. Compared to this area, the impassable mountain range that separated the 4 kingdoms was just a branch that extended outwards. And these sceneries were hidden on top of the mountain, and if one did not cross the precipitous cliff, they would not be able to see it with their own eyes. Lightning faintly understood why her father was so obsessed with exploration. The world was too vast, and if one did not open their eyes to see it, people would forever be insignificant. Only through understanding could one become bigger. Deciding to become an explorer was the best choice she had ever made in her life. Of course, exploring the world could be done later, but Lightning did not forget that she still had a mission to complete. If she flew too far away from the kingdom of Everwinter, not only would the search efficiency be low, but the support team would also be worried. According to the time, the Roland should be arriving at the port of the kingdom of Everwinter soon. She glanced at the hand-drawn map a few times, and then set her eyes on the Great Rift. From a distance, it seemed to be a raised platform in the stone forest, but it was hollow in the middle, and it was difficult to determine how deep it was. Compared to the stone forest, where there were few changes, at least the surface of the mountain could be seen. Chapter 1209. The next morning, Lightning told Maggie about her plan. After a brief discussion, they decided not to search the stone forest layer by layer. Instead, they sped up their pace and flew straight to the platform of the Rift Valley. Whether there were any new discoveries or not, they would return to the snow ridge of the Kingdom of Everwinter and meet the Tequila Witches after drawing the topographic map of the area. At this moment, the sun had just peeked out from the skyline. The mountains were covered with mist, and there were streaks of white frost in the crisscrossing waterways, which were the traces of the flood last night. As the terrain slowly climbed, they saw more and more white until the whole mountain was covered with white. The Rift Valley in the distance was completely covered with snow. From afar, it looked like an upside-down white porcelain bowl. According to estimates, it was about 300 kilometers away from the Kingdom of Everwinter, which was as large as the southernmost region. The Union had also recorded this Rift Valley in the map of the Land of Dawn. It was believed that it was formed by a volcanic eruption, but now it had completely subsided. Lightning had also seen the volcanic craters on the searing fire islands that spewed thick smoke and sulfur all day long, but compared to this mountain, they were much smaller. 2 hours later, the exploration group approached the Rift Valley area. This spectacular and unique terrain was finally revealed to the two of them. It's so big, Maggie exclaimed while flapping her wings. It feels like a whole kingdom can be stuffed into this pit. Lightning could not help nodding. The Rift Valley she had thought was actually not a fault, and the shape of the platform was not a mountain. Instead, the ground seemed to have been forcefully split open from the inside out, and the raised rock strata formed irregular, mountain walls, which looked like scars on the ground from a bird's-eye view. If this breach was really caused by an eruption, how shocking would it have been at that time? The two lowered their altitude and landed 2 or 3 kilometers away from the Rift Valley. To be on the safe side, Maggie was usually the first to take the lead. After all, she could blend in perfectly with the local environment. Even if the enemy ran into her, they might not be able to recognize her. Listen, Lightning said. Don't go deep into the cave. Circle around the crack and come back. If you find anything unusual, don't go there alone. We must report to the leader first, and then we can decide on our next step together. Maggie interrupted. I know, Ku. You've said it many times, just like His Majesty Ku. Oh really? Lightning scratched the back of her head, a little embarrassed. She remembered that when Roland had given her such advice in the past, she had privately complained to her team members. A genius explorer would naturally know how to make the most reasonable judgment. There was no need for her to be told so many times. Now that she thought about it, she was indeed too childish at that time. Ahem, anyway, there's no harm in repeating important things a few times. I'll stay here and search the nearby area. It won't be more than a kilometer. Remember this location and return within 30 minutes. Understood? No problem, Ku. Very well, go ahead. Lightning patted her on the shoulder. Maggie, let's go. Maggie flapped her wings and flew towards the center of the Great Rift. It was not until Maggie's figure completely disappeared that Lightning withdrew her gaze and carefully looked around. Snowy owls were a common bird here, a kind of owl. They could move around day and night and had excellent eyesight. As long as one did not act rashly, the possibility of an accident was very low. On the other hand, it was much easier for Maggie to expose herself. There were glaciers everywhere, and there were almost no traces of beasts. If a demon suddenly appeared, she would become the most obvious target. Therefore, instead of looking for signs of enemy activity, Lightning first looked for places to hide. She couldn't leave all her troubles to others to deal with like she did in the past. However, in less than 5 minutes, there was a rapid sound of flying above her head. Lightning could not help but be stunned. As soon as she looked in the direction of the sound, she saw Maggie swooping down in panic and bumping into her arms. Demon, coup! The little girl shouted. Her heart suddenly skipped a beat. Was there really a god stone mine here? What did you find? A huge vigilant eye demon, lying on the stone wall below the entrance, coup! Maggie gestured with her hands and feet. As soon as I flew over the entrance, I saw it. That meant the eye demon also saw her. Lightning could not help but feel lucky that she was not always the first to rush to the front as usual. Seeing a witch and seeing a bird were two completely different things. A snowy owl should not have aroused the eye demon's vigilance. Then what? You didn't scream, did you? Just in case, Maggie still asked one more question. Of course, I'm an experienced bird. No, an explorer, coup! Maggie stuck out her chest and said. Not to mention screaming, I didn't even blink at that time. And I even pretended to look around at the scenery, quietly averting my eyes, coup! I bet it has forgotten me now, coup! Another scene flashed in Lightning's mind. A snowy owl opened its eyes wide and stared at the vigilant eye demon on the stone wall. Then it turned its head and deliberately looked away. Oh no! She suddenly grabbed Maggie and rushed to a hiding place that she had found earlier. Coup! Maggie did not have time to react. It was an ice cave hundreds of meters away. Probably because of the surrounding rocks, the snow did not fill the crack below, which was just enough for one person to hide in. Lightning rushed into the cave and lowered her body, only showing half of her head to look at the top of the rift valley. A moment later, a door with a strange luster appeared out of nowhere in the air. Then a demon walked out of the door and floated straight above the rift valley. Lightning felt that even her breathing slowed down. She felt the pressure from the demon was no less than that from Osruk. The demon looked around for a while, then suddenly rushed down the mountain. For a moment, Lightning felt that all the blood in her body was about to freeze. Her body almost subconsciously wanted to turn around and escape. If it wasn't for the fact that the other party's direction and hiding place didn't match, she was afraid that she would have followed her instincts. The demon plunged into the ice and snow, splashing a large cloud of white fog. When it stood up again, there was a snowy owl in its hand. Lightning swallowed her saliva and touched her chest involuntarily. Fortunately, Maggie was still here. The demon looked at the frightened snowy owl for a long time. Finally, it shook its head in disappointment and let go of the owl. The snowy owl immediately screamed and flew into the sky, soon turning into a white. The demon did not stay for long. It clenched its hands again and tore open the door of light in front of it. Then it stepped into the door and disappeared in front of them. Lightning finally let out a sigh of relief. In this way, the exploration group's whereabouts were not exposed. What should we do next? Maggie finally realized her wrong reaction and asked with her head drooped. If it was in the past, Lightning would have tried to sneak into the Rift Valley from another direction. The Rift Valley was so wide that even the vigilant eye demons could not monitor every corner. For an explorer, the first one to discover something and the second one were separated by only one person. But the significance was completely different. If possible, she would always want to be the first one. However, at this moment, she was not just an explorer, but the leader of the Neverwinter Exploration Group, and a sentinel who opened up new horizons for the First Army. No matter what was hidden under the Rift Valley, the appearance of the vigilant eye demons and the senior demon was a sign of extreme danger. She had to send the news back to Neverwinter as soon as possible and inform King Roland Wimbledon. Chapter 12:10. Did you find anything? After Hacksword walked out of the distortion door, an upgraded aide-de-camp came up to him and asked. No. He opened his palm and looked at it for a while. Perhaps the eye demon sensed wrongly. This is not a rare situation. You can rest in the Red Mist Pond, and let me keep watch for you." The aide-de-camp paused. "That Lord Vaucries often soaks in the pond. I think it's good for you to relax occasionally." It was a good suggestion. He wanted to soak in the pond whenever he had nothing to do, close his eyes, and feel the mysteries and vastness of the realm of mind. The problem was that if something went wrong on the Western Front, the king would not blame the Nightmare Lord, but would vent all his anger on him. The Sky Lord was silent for a while. "For you, connecting 4 demons at the same time is too strenuous. And now that the plan has reached its most crucial stage, it's better for me to control it personally. This is the last station of the Western Front. We must not disappoint the king." At the mention of the king, the aide-de-camp's expression immediately turned solemn. "You're right. I've been too lax." No, the only one who was lax was the one who soaked in the pond all day. Hacksword thought to himself expressionlessly. Ever since Osrook was attacked by the humans in Tequila, and this place became the center of the Western Front plan, he had put in all his effort. Just the precious demons alone had been taken from the front lines by trickery to ensure that no matter which direction the enemy came from, they would be immediately sensed. As the most sensitive observer, the 1,000 eyes of the demons were not limited by size, distance, or brightness. As long as someone saw them, regardless of whether they were invisible or separated by layers of barriers, they would instantly be exposed to the demon's consciousness, and their clansmen who were connected to them would immediately sense it. As this process was extremely exhausting, generally speaking, only those who had advanced were qualified to connect to the demons. Even so, the world that the demons could observe was extremely complicated. If they were to receive everything, they could only stand still and do nothing. Therefore, the demons would do a preliminary screening and judge every creature that saw them. Only those that were clearly threatening or had abnormal behavior would be submitted to the connection. What Hacksword felt just now was the latter. But just as the aide-de-camp had said, it was not rare for demons to issue false alarms. After all, the behavior of living creatures was strange and difficult to understand. For example, there were people as unfathomable as the king, as well as freaks like Mask. It was normal for the demons, who lacked the ability to think systematically, to be unable to distinguish them one by one. In order to accommodate all the eyes that filled their heads, they had sacrificed too much in other areas. As a result, not a single eye guard had become a great dark monarch despite possessing magic power. Of course, this did not stop them from being an extremely rare species. The birth rate of their young was only higher than that of the hatchery, and the mother of soul. After temporarily putting this matter aside, Skylord changed the topic. "How's the revival of the birth tower going?" "The construction has been completed. Everything is going smoothly." "Very well, come with me to take a look around." "Yes, sir." Due to the influence of the god stone of retaliation, he could not go straight to the bottom of the valley. He could only walk down the long staircase. As they continued to descend, their surroundings became scarlet. It was caused by the red mist floating in the air. The towering cliffs formed a natural container, and as long as they kept replenishing themselves, the red mist would easily accumulate. After half a year of modification, the mist density in the lower half of the valley was close to that of a city, enough to supply tens of thousands of firstborn. But this was not Hacksword's ultimate goal. Only by erecting a birth tower on top of a god stone mine could his race break free from the restrictions of transportation and obtain an endless supply of resources. Only then could he truly establish a foothold here. When he descended to the bottom, a bluish-purple light replaced the sun. Under the illumination of the god stone of retaliation, a magnificent stone tower appeared in front of him. Even Hacksword felt a trace of shock from the bottom of his heart. "No matter how many times I see it, I still find it unbelievable." The adjutant sighed. "Originally, our race only had the opportunity to witness its birth on the day of the origin of magic's arrival. Indeed, but this is no longer the time for the second battle of divine will," Hacksword said with a nod. "That's right, this was a birth tower that should not have appeared in this place. It did not grow from a godstone mine, but was a matured physical structure. Although it had to rely on the huge tower base to maintain its upright position, and its grayish-brown mottled body looked like it was dead. Hacksword knew that this was only temporary. When the time was right, it could rely on the Mother of Soul to reconnect with the mine. This was the evolution they had obtained from the Legacy Shard. In the past 400 years, whether it was their understanding of magic power or the use of magic stones, their race had undergone earth-shattering changes. And the most obvious change was their efforts to break free from the restrictions of the Red Mist. But there was one thing he did not say. It seemed that the same was true for humans. Walking into the base of the tower, Skylord saw the Mother of Soul in a deep slumber. It was the root of everything and the most important individual in the race. Only when the Divine Will appeared and the magic power between heaven and earth was at its peak would it welcome its maturation and completely integrate with the Godstone of Punishment. After that, it would take several years to transform the mine from a stone pillar into a tower, and then use magic power to breed the red mist that covered the sky. With the new technology, this lengthy process was no longer necessary. A birth tower that could be put to use quickly meant that the race's preparation time would be greatly reduced. As long as there were sufficient resources, they could even use the floating monsters as a weapon to quickly transform the enemy's territory into their own. Around the Mother of Soul, there were nearly 100 inferior demons without magic. They carefully took care of the Mother of Soul, taking care of it and taking care of it. There were tens of thousands of such inferior demons at the bottom of the Great Rift. Through the window of the tower base, Hacksword saw an extremely busy scene. Newborns and tombstones were digging tunnels and transporting resources, while bogle beasts were flying here and there, passing down orders. In the center of the rift stood a row of symbiotic demons that Mask had recently cultivated. Once the order was given, this group of powerful war machines would swarm toward the enemy like a swarm of bees. For a moment, he had the illusion that this was the front line of the war. But that was not entirely wrong, Hacksword thought. If the defense line on the continent collapsed, their future would be bleak. Similarly, if they could not defeat and devour the humans here, the future of the race would not be bright either. Chapter 12:11. In Grey Castle, City of Neverwinter. Due to the inconvenience of transporting Longsong cannons, the gun battalion was sent to the Kingdom of Wolfheart and the Kingdom of Everwinter to carry out His Majesty's population migration plan, while the artillery battalion was free. In addition to daily training and helping with the autumn harvest, the soldiers who were not on duty could go home and spend their precious leisure time with their families. Vanner was no exception. Now that he was a battalion commander, it was difficult for him to apply for a vacation, so he naturally cherished this opportunity. In addition to spending time with family and visiting neighbors, it was also an essential activity for him to have a party with old friends. After all, alcohol was not allowed in the army. If he wanted to have a good drink, he could only do it during his vacation. After years of development, the commercial prosperity of City of Neverwinter had long surpassed that of the old King's City. The commercial street plan advocated by His Majesty at the beginning, that was every house facing the street would be built into a two-story shop for rent. Now it had become a hot spot. Many merchants from other places had moved in. Some of them were selling special goods transported from various places, while others were renovated into hotels, restaurants, and taverns. If the convenience market provided daily necessities, then these shops provided a rich supplement. Walking on the crowded street, Vanner could not help but feel impressed by His Majesty's foresight. Even though the peddlers were hawking their wares one after another, the urban road was not congested at all. The peddlers did not pile up their shops all over the street. Everyone shuttled back and forth on the special stone-paved walkway, while the carriages ran on the black road. Everything seemed to be in order. He remembered that when the construction team first laid the line and built the road, many people did not understand why the street was so wide, especially the separation of people and carriages, which seemed superfluous and unnecessary. Now it seemed that the plan was just right, as if His Majesty had foreseen this scene in advance. After passing through two main roads, Vanner came to the Lucky Cannonball Tavern, which was also his destination. As soon as he entered the tavern, a man behind the counter immediately limped out and greeted him. "Sir, you're here." "Don't call me sir. That's how people in the army call me," You're no longer in the First Army. Just call me Vanner. He smiled as he hugged the man and patted him hard on the back. How's business recently? It should be good, right? Compared to his name, Vanna was more impressed by his nickname, Iron Crutch. Half a year ago, in the fierce battle on Tower No. 1. In order to recapture the artillery position occupied by the demons, Iron Crutch, who was still serving in the artillery battalion, led a team to charge at the demons. As a result, a javelin pierced through his abdomen to his leg, and he lost consciousness on the spot. Although he was saved by Miss Angel after the incident, there were too many missing parts, so he couldn't fully recover. His entire right leg had to be temporarily replaced by a metal rod, and the nickname, Iron Crutch, was passed down. After retiring from the army, Iron Crutch received a sum of subsidies, and together with his accumulated salary, he opened the Lucky Cannonball Tavern in the Eastern District, which could be regarded as a frequent gathering place for the First Army on vacation. The rent is reduced during the period of injury, and it's enough to support the family. Iron Crutch rubbed his hands and said, "Of course, it would be better if you could visit us a few more times." Vanner felt a surge of gratification in his heart. "You'll have to wait until I quit or become like you. By the way, have the Rona brothers arrived?" "They're all upstairs. Let me take you there." No, it's okay. You go about your own business first. When there are fewer customers, come up and have a few drinks with us." "Okay, that's a deal." Iron Crutch agreed readily. Vanner went upstairs and immediately saw his old fellows sitting around a round table. Jop, Cat's Claw, Rodney, Narson. When the artillery battalion was first established, they were just a bunch of young lads in the same artillery team. They were the kind that would tremble in fear at the sight of a knight's charge. But now they had basically become the backbone of the artillery battalion, and each of them had their own subordinates. If it were not for such a special holiday, it would have been very difficult for them to gather together like before. After that, it was a happy time where everyone toasted and drank to their heart's content. There was nothing they wouldn't talk about, but the most common topic was still the army itself and the upcoming Battle of Divine Will. After all, according to His Majesty, the scale of this war was unprecedented, and the whole continent would be involved in it. It was unknown how many people would be able to sit together and drink after the war ended. Actually, we're already considered lucky. At least we don't have to deal with those monsters head-on. Rodney drank a mouthful of ale, and let out a long sigh. If we lose the cannons, it's basically the same as a complete defeat. The problem is, who knows what new tricks the demons have up their sleeves. Tower Station number 1 was caught unprepared, wasn't it? Cat's Claw shrugged. I just hope that when the time comes, our soldiers can at least fight back, instead of waiting for the guys from the firearm battalion and the special tactics squad to rescue us. His words resonated with the others. That's right. It would be great if we also had powerful continuous firing weapons. Revolver rifles can deal with the night charge, but not the demons. Save it. I heard that the army plans to replace all bolt-action rifles. Very soon, you won't even see revolvers. No way. Battalion Commander, is that true? Vanner nodded when he saw everyone looking at him. In fact, the 1st and 6th squads have already gotten new weapons. It'll take some time for the other squads to get the new ones, because of the production problem. Jop frowned. I've also tried the new gun. Its accuracy and power are good, but the speed at which it fires and retracts is not suitable to be used as a melee weapon. Can't the artillery battalion continue to use the original weapons? I'm afraid not. This is the decision of the higher-ups. Vanner pointed to the top of his head. The revolver uses old-fashioned black powder, and the bullets look the same. It's definitely more cost-effective to save some workers to make new bullets. Then, how about asking Sir Iron Axe to design a new weapon for us with His Majesty? Don't even think about it, Nelson snorted. If there's such a good thing, Brian and the others will have it. That's right. The artillery battalion only needs cannons, Cat's Claw said, imitating Brian's tone. Don't you always say that the thicker the pipe, the better? Let the gun battalion keep this kind of small pipe. Guys, let's drink. Everyone laughed and raised their glasses, but Vanner did not respond. He stared at the wine in his glass motionlessly, as if he was thinking about something. Battalion commander? Vanner touched his chin and said slowly, "What if we make it ourselves?" Make what? A new flintlock? Cat's Claw raised his eyebrows. Battalion commander, are you drunk? Come on. I don't know if you've noticed, but whether it's the shotgun used by the Special Tactics Squad, or the Mark I heavy machine gun of the gun battalion, they all shoot repeatedly through the same air pipe. Vanner recalled and said, I've seen a lot of weapons that were dismantled and recycled. Although the structure is different, the principle is almost the same. Really? Why didn't I know that? That's why he's the battalion commander, not you. Rodney curled his lips and said, but even so, it requires a lot of manpower and materials. And the weapons factory is not under Sir Iron Axe's management. No, when I say build, I mean improve on the existing guns. The more Vanner said, the clearer his thinking became. We don't need to trouble the weapon factory, nor will it increase the burden on the administrative office. We only need the assistance of a skilled worker. The other three looked at Jop at the same time. Chapter 12:12. At noon the next day, they followed Jop to the second machinery factory in the industrial zone. After briefly explaining the purpose of their visit, Jop's brother, Lafite, showed great interest. He took the rifle from Vanner and fiddled with it fondly. Is this really okay? I used to be a miner, and now I only do rough work like polishing and cutting. If I accidentally break it? Brother. Jop coughed twice. It's not a big problem if it's only one or two. After all, firearms can be damaged during practice. Vanner said frankly, if it's more than this number, it only means that my idea is not feasible. I won't blame you. I see. Lafite nodded excitedly. Then please leave it to me. But the machine tools in the factory may not be free. I'll try to find time to help you. Your brother seems to like flintlocks very much. Cat's Claw whispered to Jop. That's not surprising. Rodney moved closer to Vanner. Who doesn't like powerful weapons? It used to be swords, but now it's just flintlocks and cannons. Vanner couldn't agree more. After witnessing the power of the 12-pound field artillery, he gradually changed his hobby from cooking eggs to this duty. He opened the leather bag carried by his companion, took out a metal pipe from a scrapped heavy machine gun, and said to Lafite, then let's start now. The rifle barrel was disassembled and fixed on the drill press. Lafite twisted the switch, aimed the drill at the marked position, and carefully closed the distance between the two. When the drill came into contact with the barrel, the silk-like metal debris instantly splashed. For Vanner, this was a very fresh scene. Although he knew that both the steam engine and the long-song cannon were processed from pieces of metal ingots, it was the first time for him to see them at such a close distance. In his mind, the indestructible steel was changing its shape under the drill bit by bit, as if its hardness no longer existed. This kind of experience was really amazing. According to Lafite, some of the machine tools in the second machinery factory had been replaced by the third generation driven by Dawn Eye, which was much better than the machine tools driven by the steam engine in the past. Both the vibration and the noise were greatly reduced, and it could be started at any time. As long as the technique was good enough, some old masters could even carve flowers on a finger-sized iron rod. However, Vanner did not need such superb craftsmanship. After a night of thinking, he had sorted out his whole idea. In short, it was to use the least number of steps and a handful of resources to achieve the goal. After all, this kind of transformation must be easy to use, and it must not interfere with the normal production of the factory. For this reason, he had specially brought the air duct from the Mark I to simplify the process and save time. With the key components in place, the first step of drawing out the gunpowder was no longer a problem. The key was how to achieve continuous shooting. In fact, Vanner had long been interested in the heavy machine guns of the Flintlock Battalion. During the Northern Expedition, he had played with the treasures of the anti-air squads in the artillery positions. One thing he was sure of was that in order to accommodate a set of complex reloading mechanism, the body of the Mark I gun was much larger than the rifle. Also, the way the ammunition chain was loaded was different from the way the magazine was loaded. It was not realistic to move the entire gun over. Even if it was feasible, it would mean that the production of the heavy machine guns was already low, and they would have to allocate some spare parts for the artillery. Even if Brian remained indifferent, Sir Ironaxe would definitely scold him. The best way was to not make any changes to the gun body, and try to concentrate all the changes on the outside of the gun body. This should be enough. Lafayette finished cleaning the drilling hole, and compared the rifle barrel and the air duct to the sunlight outside the window. If we cut off the extra part of the air duct, the two pipes should be able to match. Don't rush to connect them. Vanner took out a piece of white paper from his pocket and spread it in front of Lafayette. Next, I want you to make a part like this. There was a rather simple drawing on the paper. It was curved about 1 finger long and 2 fingers wide, and there was a groove in the middle. What's this? Everyone came up and asked curiously. It doesn't look like a part of a gun. Vanner was also a little uncertain. After all, this was only his personal idea and had not been verified yet. However, in front of his subordinates, he could not show any weakness. Ahem. If everything goes well, this thing will replace our hands. 5 days later, many soldiers of the artillery battalion gathered on the shooting training ground of the First Army. They learned from their respective superiors that a flintlock specially designed for artillerymen was being tested. Unlike the equipment commonly used in the army, this weapon was not designed by His Majesty, but was the brainchild of the battalion commander, Sir Vanner. Vanner's statement naturally aroused everyone's interest. Even though they were on vacation, they wanted to see what the new weapon looked like. To everyone's surprise, although the weapon on the test platform would jam and malfunction from time to time, it could indeed shoot continuously. As long as the trigger was constantly pulled, it could pour out all the bullets in its belly in a short period of time. Compared with the 5 bullets of the revolving rifle, the new weapon could hold more than 20 bullets at one go. If a few more were installed, it would be comparable to a heavy machine gun. I didn't expect you could really make it. Cat's Claw exclaimed in admiration. I finally understand why Sir Ironaxe chose you as the battalion commander. This is actually His Majesty's credit. Didn't he often say that we should combine the knowledge we learned from books with the actual situation? I just made a small attempt, Vanner said proudly. He had not expected that it would be so smooth. In just 5 days, they had assembled a usable weapon. Furthermore, they had basically achieved their goals. After making some minor adjustments, the artillery battalion would be able to obtain enough firepower to protect themselves with a small amount of resources. Excuse me, are you Battalion Commander Vanner? Someone suddenly asked. Yes, you are. Vanner turned his head in the direction of the voice. I'm a member of the precision shooting team. My name is Danny, the man said with a smile. When I was on duty, I saw a lot of people here, so I came to learn about the situation. May I try the new weapon you designed? Precision shooting team? Jop was stunned and then winked at Vanner. Chief. Vanner naturally knew the origin of this team. Every precision shooter was an outstanding soldier carefully selected by Brian from the gun battalion. Not long after the formation of the team, they became famous in the battle against the church in Coldwind Ridge, and were awarded the Marksman Medal by His Majesty. They could be said to be the best of the best. Moreover, judging from the other party's attire, his position in the team should not be low. If they could make such people envious of the guns of the artillery battalion, wouldn't it mean that they could completely surpass the gun battalion? Chapter 12-13. When Danny held the gun, the first thing he felt was that its center of gravity had changed, and the gun itself had become heavier. Without looking at the second tube beside the barrel, it was essentially a very common bolt rifle, no different from the ones used by most soldiers in the gun battalion. In terms of workmanship, it was obviously not as good as the accurate rifle he was used to. The most striking change was that the metal tube on the side of the gun extended all the way to the body and connected to the bolt. This must be the key to the weapon's continuous shooting, Danny thought. He bent down to aim at the target with ease and pulled the trigger. Instead of looking directly at the direction of the muzzle, he stared at the iron tube on one side of the gun. With the tremor of the bullet being fired, an incredible scene happened. Although everything happened in the blink of an eye, as a marksman, Danny still saw the whole process of the bolt being pulled. Almost at the same time, the long rod hidden in the iron tube seemed to be pushed out by something, and the metal plate at the end of the rod retreated together. The plate was connected to the bolt. According to common sense, the bolt, which was locked, could not be pulled out. If the bolt was pulled out by force, it would either stop retreating or break the long rod. However, the bolt bounced up along the hollow track in the center of the plate, unlocked, and successfully removed the cartridge. After that, the process was completely reversed. The long rod retracted back into the tube, and the bolt returned to its original position. The bolt fell back into the bottom along the plate and locked the barrel again. What a brilliant design! Danny sighed inwardly. This part was so easy to understand that even a layman like him could understand its principle at a glance. To put it simply, the long rod in the second iron tube was used to replace the movement of the hand. The ingenious part was that the long rod only needed to move in a straight line to achieve the 4 changes of lifting, pulling, pushing, and pressing. Without the intervention of the user, the long rod automatically prepared for the next round of shooting. On a whim, Danny fired all the remaining bullets. Smelling the intoxicating smell of gunpowder, he heard the long-lost voice. 1 out of 19 missed. Malt chuckled. What's wrong? Are you not used to the new weapon? I'm not used to it yet. If you don't believe me, I'll show you the next round of shooting. I don't believe what? A surprised voice interrupted. Danny suddenly came to himself. He was not on the battlefield, but in the shooting training field surrounded by a group of onlookers. He got up and looked at the artillery battalion commander, who had a puzzled look on his face. He pretended to be nonchalant and shook his head. No, I'm just talking to myself. He's not even satisfied with a score of 19 out of 20 shots. As expected of the First Army's godly archer, Vanner patted him on the shoulder and asked expectantly, So, what do you think of this gun? Danny knew a little about the open and veiled struggle between the artillery battalion and the flintlock battalion, but they were all working for His Majesty. He did not want to hide his admiration for the new weapon. Except for its stability and weight, it's almost perfect. If possible, I hope the weapons of the precision shooting team can be modified in the same way. In terms of accuracy, at least on the 50-meter and 100-meter targets, its performance was not much worse than that of an ordinary rifle. The added weight was not good for standing shooting and charging, but it was not a problem for the precision shooting team. It should be the same for the artillery battalion. The biggest advantage of the new weapon was that it could fire continuously. If the first shot missed, the movement of pulling the bolt and reloading the gun would cause the head to tilt and the muzzle to rise. It would take several breaths for the precision shooting team to relock the target through the scope, and it was common for them to lose the original target. Therefore, the interval between each shot was much longer than that of an ordinary soldier. But the gun in the test could obviously improve this point. He only needed to adjust the muzzle slightly, and he could immediately reload the second bullet after the correction. Especially when the enemy swarmed in, he could almost imagine the scene of quickly killing a group of targets. Hearing this comment, Vanner could not help but grin. At present, this is just an immature design. If you can help us perfect this weapon, I'll be more confident when I apply to Sir Iron Axe. Vanner's idea was very simple. If the precision shooting team really used the new gun designed by the artillery battalion, he would definitely be better than Brian. Danny's idea was even simpler. He was very fond of weapons that could efficiently kill demons, and the smell of gunpowder during the test would also bring Malt back to him. It's my pleasure, battalion commander. They looked at each other and smiled. They reached an agreement. When Roland heard the news, it was already several days later. More and more soldiers of the artillery battalion came to visit the No. 2 machinery factory, which attracted the attention of the person in charge of the factory. Since it was related to the army, the person in charge did not dare to stop them. Instead, he reported the news to the administrative office, which was eventually passed on to Anna, the Minister of Industry. Looking at the sample reproduced by Anna, Roland did not know whether to laugh or cry. The design of this kind of reproducing mechanism was simple and crude. Although it could meet the requirements of continuous firing, it was very easy for it to malfunction in the complicated environment of the field, so it needed more time and energy to maintain. In this case, it seemed to be suitable for artillery soldiers who did not have many opportunities to fire. What do you think? Anna asked with a smile. Well, although there are many areas that can be improved, it's a good sign. Roland said casually. At least it shows that they have begun to think about what kind of weapon they really need. Moreover, the advantage of this gun is very obvious. It can be directly modified on existing rifles. Even with the current resources, we can afford it. Of course, it was fine as long as the whole army did not have to change their weapons. Otherwise, the consumption of bullets would be astonishing. In addition, the soldiers in the front line who had the support of heavy machine guns did not need continuous firing weapons as much as artillery soldiers. If that's the case, I'll give them a hand. Anna nodded. With the Queen's help, the new weapon was quickly finalized. The bolt and the piston parts, which were put together like a slippery buckle, were replaced with a more compact latch structure. A shell was installed at the joint of the two parts, which effectively reduced the vibration during the travel and greatly reduced the jam rate. After a part of the air duct was separated, the new weapon was finally officially modified from a handmade one. At Roland's suggestion, the continuous firing rifle was named after Vanner. After the news spread, the Ministry of Engineering suddenly received several times the number of modification proposals. Of course, Roland was happy to see this change. In other words, he finally saw the germination of universal primary education. This was far more gratifying than a new weapon. However, this was not the only pleasant surprise. Celine, the senior tequila witch, reported that there had been a key breakthrough in the research of the magic ceremony cube. Chapter 12-14. In the underground laboratory of the third border city. After reading the report, Roland rushed to the laboratory with Anna. Through the thick protective glass, he saw two activated magic ceremony cubes in the center of the laboratory, which were covered by lead plates. One of them looked normal, while the other one was glowing with a much shorter red light. That Rubik's Cube with a shorter red light. Is it the latest imitation? Anna asked keenly. Yes. In fact, it was a mistake. Celine replied excitedly. Usually, the internal lines of the magic cube are carved by slender wrist. If the material is damaged, the engraving will be ruined. Generally speaking, these faulty stones would be discarded, but a week ago, when Slender Wrist was carving assembly number 236, he only encountered a problem at the end of the process. A tiny crack appeared in the center of the stone, causing a flaw in the assembly. All the materials used to make the magic ceremony cube came from the southernmost region. According to the murals on the wall, the magic ceremony cube had been sleeping underground for at least 1,000 years. It was normal for it to be of poor quality. Roland asked thoughtfully, "And you didn't throw component number 236 away?" Celine nodded her main tentacle. "At that time, I felt it was a pity. After all, the magic ceremony cube had been completed, and it might still be useful. So I replaced the original magic cube with this component number 236. I wanted to see if it could work properly." Hey, this is a nuclear torture device." Roland secretly wiped the sweat off his forehead. "Don't worry, Your Majesty." Celine seemed to know what he was thinking. She raised her head and said, "I tested it in the weapon testing field in the impassable mountain range. If anything happens, it won't affect Neverwinter. This is the basic belief of the members of the Quest Society. Even if I die, you don't have to be sad. In order to find the truth, I've already put my own safety." Looking at the other party's incessant rambling, Roland's initial worry quickly dissipated. "Let's talk business." Ahem. "I'm sorry." Celine cleared her throat. "Anyway, as you can see, the Rubik's Cube can still be activated, but the range of the red light has been reduced to less than 1/10 of its original range. However, this did not prevent the 3 cylinders from providing heat for the power of the magic cube. So, I did another heating experiment to see if there was any change in the heating efficiency of the shortened red light. This experiment continued intermittently for 2 or 3 days. When I examined the uranium chip, I was surprised to find that it had not changed at all. Even the magic power consumption had decreased a lot. Anna pondered for a moment. Could it be that most of the Rubik's Cube's energy is used to maintain the red light? You are indeed a higher awakened who is younger than Agatha, Celine praised. After thinking about it for a long time, I am also inclined to this answer. If the light is made up of countless tiny balls, it is indeed not easy to make them move in the same direction. Moreover, the experiment proved that as long as it did not touch the red light, its front and sides would not be affected. It seemed that the shortening of the light did save a lot of effort for the Rubik's Cube. Wait a minute, Roland suddenly said. Does this mean that the defective component number 236 determines the radiation range of the Rubik's Cube? This was a groundbreaking discovery, even more significant than solving the problem of durability. The Magic Ceremony Cube had more than 300 components. These various shaped, patterned stones were put together like building blocks, and no one knew how the magic power worked in them. But now there seemed to be a way to solve this problem. You can think of it that way. Celine sounded excited. Maybe the engravings on each component have a specific function. If we can figure out the meaning of the engravings, we might be able to understand how the Magic Ceremony Cube uses its magic power. Each component is responsible for one function. From this point of view, the Radiation Clan's way of thinking is quite similar to ours. Anna could not help but laugh. Should I say this is the luck of mankind? Of course. Roland nodded without hesitation. Of course, he understood what Anna meant. Different civilizations were vastly different, not just in terms of form and language, but also in terms of thought. The chances of finding an object that he could understand and comprehend were minuscule. The underground civilization was an example. It was also a core instrument that controlled magic power, but it could only be controlled by a carrier. Celine had studied it for hundreds of years, but she still could not understand its principle. This showed how difficult it was. In a sense, civilizations were lonely. While he had reassured everyone by saying that they could learn the knowledge of fallen civilizations without relying on the legacy of the gods, it was not an easy task, especially when there was no one to guide them, and they had to fumble around on their own. When their way of thinking was completely different, how could they learn from each other's achievements? If Celine's speculation was correct, a civilization that could resonate with mankind might bring new ideas to the study of magic power. By the way, Anna suddenly smiled playfully at Roland. Now that the power of the magic cube has been finalized and there has been a breakthrough in its durability, shouldn't you fulfill the reward you promised? Looking at the pair of clear blue eyes, Roland found that he could not say a word of rejection at all. Yes, yes, yes. Your Highness. He could not help but smile. I'll show you when we get back. Tut tut tut. Boom. The faint noise outside the window made Soroya lift the quilt in a daze and sit up. Ha! She yawned sleepily and reached for the end of the bed, looking for her clothes. This sound was very familiar to her. It was the roar of the steam engine. When it sounded, it also meant the beginning of a new day. Busy and orderly work was about to begin. But it was really early. She looked at Echo, who was still sleeping soundly on the other side of the bed, and quietly put on her coat. She was even more diligent than herself, and in the castle. Wait a minute. Soroya suddenly froze. This is not the factory area. Why is there the sound of the steam engine? Thinking about it carefully, today should be a rest day. Most witches would sleep until noon, and the castle was often quiet until lunchtime, as if there was no one in it. Was he dreaming just now? Did he dream of working? Boom boom boom. Clap clap clap. However, the sound of the steam engine came from outside the window again, accompanied by bursts of laughter. This thing is so interesting. Your Majesty, let me try it. Me too. Me too. What happened? Echo rubbed her eyes and sat up. I don't know. Maybe Mystery Moon made some trouble again. Soroya stretched, walked to the window and opened the thick curtains. Sunlight suddenly poured into the room and illuminated the whole bedroom. Obviously, the sun was already in the middle of the sky, so it was not too early. After her eyes adapted to the light, She looked downstairs, and then she could not help but be stunned. The castle gate was surrounded by sisters of the witch union. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the center of the courtyard, and their faces were full of eagerness. Following their gazes, Soroya saw Princess Anna sitting in a strange four-wheeled carriage. Even without a horse, it was still running around the courtyard very happily. In the carriage, Anna's smile was so bright that it even overshadowed the warm morning light. Chapter 12:15. Your Majesty, what is that thing that Princess Anna is driving? Roland turned around and saw Echo and Soroya running out of the castle. It's a car. A Rubik's Cube car. Before he could speak, Mystery Moon had already answered. If you want to experience it, stand behind me. Don't jump the queue. A car? Soroya repeated the new term. A car driven by a steam engine? But the boiler part was replaced by the relics of the radioactive people, so it can be reduced to this size. Mystery Moon yelled the news she had heard. But compared to an electric motor, they're still a bit too big. If it's driven by Dawn Eye, it'll be the perfect form of a car. No, it should be called a magnetic car. Who's the one who says that it's too tiring to enchant dozens of copper rods? Lily curled her lips and said, Now you want to enchant a car? Mystery Moon lowered her voice. I haven't been an adult for long. I don't have enough magic power now, but it doesn't mean I'll be like this in the future. Maybe the next time I awaken, I'll be able to enchant a lot of Dawn Eye easily. It's better for Miss Doris to have a breakthrough in her demonization ability than for you to evolve. Lily shrugged. If you keep nagging, I'll steal your chaos drinks. Don't you dare. Phyllis covered her mouth and chuckled. In fact, whether it's driven by steam or electricity, it's still called a car. Really? All the witches looked at her in unison. Well, in the dream world, it's named like this. Phyllis could not hide her pride in her words. Compared with the one driven by Her Highness, the cars there are much more complete. Not only can it avoid the wind and rain, but it also has heating in winter and air conditioning in summer. It can even be used as a mobile house. As for driving, it's as fast as lightning. Even the best horse can't catch up with it. Have you ever driven one? Mystery Moon was so envious that her eyes almost popped out. Of course, Phyllis said intoxicatedly. I once drove His Majesty's car across the endless highway. When the speed was at the limit, the roar of the wind almost covered everything, and the car was shaking as if it was cutting through the wind and waves. That feeling was really exciting. In fact, it was because the soundproofing of his car was too poor. Coupled with the suspension of the scooter, it was as if it was going to fall apart once it was on the highway. Roland couldn't help but facepalm. It was clearly just a plain van, but the other party described it as a luxury car. This contrast really made him feel a little ashamed. But then again, no matter how cheap it was, the completion rate was much higher than this Rubik's Cube car. From the beginning to the end, the car only took less than 4 days. It used a steam engine at the front and a heating tank at the back. The entire power system was simply and crudely fixed on the frame, and a sofa was installed in the middle. Then the car was completed. It did not have a traditional gearbox or even an accelerator. Apart from the steering wheel, clutch, and brake, the speed was controlled by the air valve next to the seat. When the magic ceremony cube heated the water enough to drive the steam engine, the car could start to move. As the steam pressure in the pipe gradually increased, the car would move faster and faster. Depending on the opening and closing of the air valve, part of the steam would leak out from the tailpipe, so that the steam engine would not be overloaded and the speed could be controlled. In other words, the only way to slow down was to release the brake and the clutch, and the only way to speed up was to release the brake and let the car gradually return to its maximum speed. At the same time, under high air pressure, the gears that were rotating at high speed would probably be damaged. Therefore, once the car came to a complete stop, the air valve must be opened to reduce the air pressure, and then the car would start to climb again at a low speed. With such a sluggish power system, coupled with a frame without any cushioning and a steering mechanism that was purely manual, it was not hard to drive this car. But even so, Anna was still smiling extremely happily, like a little girl who had received a gift she liked. She ran around the courtyard again and again, and even now, she still had no intention of stopping. Not only Anna, but the other witches who had heard the news also showed an extraordinary interest in the car. Exclamations and discussions could be heard without end. After the final battle of the tequila, the long-lost laughter returned to their faces. The only thing that disappointed Roland was that Tilly was not among them. According to Nightingale, Tilly had recently devoted all her time to the training of the aerial knight, and even came to the castle less often. Roland guessed that it would be difficult for Tilly to untie the knot in her heart until the demons were completely destroyed. When Anna slowly stopped the car and asked the witches, "Who wants to try it?" she was instantly surrounded by the witches. In the end, Sylvie, who had first noticed the magic cube car and rushed to the scene, became the second driver after Anna. "How do you feel?" Roland asked Anna, who had returned to his side. "It's more interesting than I thought," she said with a smile. "Thank you, Roland. It's great that you could teach me this." Hearing her serious answer and her dazzling smile, Roland was slightly dazed. After a while, he turned his head away in embarrassment, as if he had returned to the time when he first met her. "Well, as long as you're happy. By the way," Anna said, blinking, "if Celine can find a stable way to make the magic ceremony cube, it should be useful in the battle of divine will, right?" "In theory, yes." Roland coughed twice and pulled back his drifting thoughts. Compared to other power sources, as long as the water supply is guaranteed, the machinery driven by the magic cube steam engine can keep running. The longer the battle line is, the more obvious its logistical advantage will be. For example, the armored war machines with longsong cannons above their heads? Phyllis interrupted excitedly. "If you can make them, there's nothing to be afraid of even if you encounter the spider demons at close range." Indeed, as long as the power was up to standard, armored troops would no longer be out of reach, especially the powerful tanks that could attack and defend. Ever since they were invented, they had become the main characters that dominated the land. Even if they were just born, they could withstand the spears and bone needles of the mad demons and the spider monstrous beasts, creating a bloody path for the soldiers behind them. But at the same time, the production of such weapons required a lot of accumulation, not only in terms of technology and practice, but also in terms of the workers. Anna could not produce biplanes and armored weapons at the same time, so it was unrealistic to directly start the project of the King of Land Warfare. In the end, given the limited resources and production level, this part of the work had to be completed by the constantly expanding number of workers in Neverwinter. Therefore, the first project that came to Roland's mind was not a tank or an infantry fighting vehicle, but a civilian equipment. It could greatly improve the efficiency of farming and save more industrial workers for the kingdom. In addition, it used the same technology as armored vehicles, so it was very suitable to use it to accumulate relevant talents. When necessary, its production line could immediately be transferred to the production of weapons and equipment. Chapter 12:16. "Ah! Help, I can't turn around. Can someone help me?" While Roland was thinking about how to make better use of the power of the magic cube, he suddenly heard a familiar scream in the courtyard. He looked up and saw that the car did not detour around the courtyard, but rushed into the flower bed in the center of the courtyard. The person sitting in the car was Mystery Moon, who had replaced Sylvie. This idiot." Lily gritted her teeth and said, "Hit the brake." "I hit the brake. But I can't." "Ah." Mystery Moon cried in panic. The out-of-control steam car swerved left and right in the flower bed. When it rushed out of the flower bed, it happened to crash into the castle gate. "Your Majesty, watch out." Vendy's face changed dramatically. The crowd was instantly thrown into chaos. Holy sh**t. Roland stared at Mystery Moon, who was hugging the steering wheel with her eyes closed. How could a car without the accelerator be so powerful? Was she a female driver from the other world? To his surprise, none of the witches around him scattered. Instead, they all stood in front of him. In an instant, all kinds of abilities swarmed out. Anna's wall of blackfire and Lotus's ravine formed a barrier between him and the courtyard. Ify's magic cage and Andrea's arrow of light were ready to shoot at the wheel. Nightingale also grabbed his arm and was ready to drag him into the mist at any time. In the end, it was Phyllis and Lorger who stopped the car accident with pure strength. They immediately stood in front of everyone, grabbed the anti-collision bar of the car, and lifted the front wheel off the ground. Anna manipulated the blackfire to turn off the magic ceremony cube. The steam engine, which had lost its pressure, quickly calmed down. Ah! Everyone run. Mystery Moon still held the steering wheel tightly and shouted, "You big stupid fool." Lily jumped over the ravine and climbed into the car. She slapped Mystery Moon hard on the back of the head, making her scream disappear. Mystery Moon opened her eyes and covered her head with her hands. Mystery Moon. Seeing Vendi and Scroll aggressively surrounding her, Mystery Moon finally came to her senses. "I'm sorry, I was wrong." However, it was too late for her to apologize. Before the head of the detective group could defend herself, she was dragged into the castle by the two girls. "You're the one who gets into trouble every time. Cancel this week's vacation. Copy the rules of the Witch Union 100 times. There are still 5 more sets of exercises. You can only eat after you finish them." It was not until Mystery Moon's wailing disappeared in the castle that the witches shivered as if they had experienced it themselves. Of course, Her Highness the Queen was not included. "I've checked the car, and there are no problems with the steering and braking mechanism." Anna had finished her inspection and returned to Roland's side. "I'm afraid there's only one reason why Mystery Moon deviated from the road." "What is it?" "She's too weak," Anna said helplessly. Roland could not help but laugh out loud. Was it because she was too weak to steer the car properly, which eventually led to the partial pair? It seemed that before the steering and braking assist devices were installed, those who were less than or equal to Mystery Moon's strength had to decline the test. The messy courtyard was quickly repaired by Lotus and Anna. Looking at the witches who were staring at him, Roland laughed and shook his head. "If you still want to leave, you can ask Anna. As long as she agrees, I have no objection. Just be careful not to tear the castle down. By the way, don't forget to come back for lunch." "Yes, Your Majesty." "Please let me be the first to board the carriage." "Hey, I was the first one." Once again, the courtyard was filled with everyone's joyful laughter. "Sir, here we are." The carriage slowly stopped in front of a tavern. Victor Lothar got out of the carriage, threw 2 silver royals to the coachman, and then walked into the tavern. "You're here, Mr. Victor." Soon, a pretty woman in a close-fitting white robe trotted over and took the luggage from his hands enthusiastically. "The boss has prepared a room for you. Please follow me." It was still the largest room on the top floor. Everything in the room was the same as when he left, including the incense, wine, and his maid, Tinkle. Victor nodded with satisfaction. This was the power of money. Although it could not reverse life and death, it had the magic power to freeze time. "You were away for a long time this time." Tinkle quickly opened the curtains, set up the window, and poured him a cup of hot tea. "The boss guessed that you might have been robbed or encountered a shipwreck when you went out to sea and would never come back. Every day, he asked the accountant to count the golden dragon you left behind to see how long it could pay for the room. On the one hand, he wanted to rent the room to someone else in advance, but on the other hand, he dared not violate the contract laws of Neverwinter. He was so embarrassed that I could die of laughter." Looking at the lively maid, Victor felt the fatigue accumulated from the long journey dissipated a little. "Aren't you afraid of him knowing that you said these things?" Tinkle stuck out her tongue. "Unless you tell him secretly. By the way, where have you been these days? Are you busy with a big business?" "Sort of." Victor sipped the black tea. "I've been staying in the southern region for the past 6 months. "Oh, the southern region?" Tinkle tilted her head and said, "There aren't many gems there, right?" "There are gems everywhere, as long as you know how to find them." He shrugged. "For example, in the southern region, gems grow on branches." "Sir, you're teasing me again." The maid pouted. Victor smiled. He knew that the maid would not believe him. In fact, Even he himself found it hard to believe that a cotton field could be more beautiful than gems before he saw it with his own eyes. The seeds cultivated by Miss Leaf could be described as incredible. When the shrubs grew up, the cotton that bloomed from the flowers and fruits was big, fluffy, and as white as snow. Compared with the thin cotton buds in his memory, it was almost like a different kind of crop. During the planting period, he did not stay idle. He mobilized a team of tailors from his hometown, hired people to build a factory in the port of Clearwater, contacted contacts, and prepared a trade route. As soon as the cotton field was harvested, he was immediately busy. Things went better than he had imagined. As soon as the new cotton was put on the market, it quickly overwhelmed other similar goods with its extremely high quality and affordable price. From quilts to cotton-padded clothes, every product achieved very high sales in various cities. Of course, Victor did not forget the competition that His Majesty had mentioned. When other merchants began to buy Miss Leaf's cotton seeds from Neverwinter, this part of the market would definitely be squeezed. Therefore, on top of the simple cotton products, he also prepared a series of high-end products, mainly sets of clothes. From the design, materials, and tailoring, all of them followed the path of excellence. He also embroidered a unique 5-colored gem logo on the cuffs and collar of each piece of clothing to show that it was different from others. This kind of clothing, which was very upper-class style, was soon recognized by some people, and gradually gained a special nickname, Rainbow Stone. In addition, he did not give up on those low-priced products. Whether it was quilts or robes, they were all marked with the same logo. The only difference was that the line used for the logo was monochrome. Victor vaguely felt that in this way, even if other merchants lowered the price than him, there would still be some people who would choose ordinary clothes embroidered with the Rainbow Stone logo, just like in the past when they sold jewelry. The nobles preferred the works of famous carvings. How long will you stay this time? Seeing that he did not continue the topic, Tinkle changed the topic. About 3 or 4 days. I have a lot of things to do in the Southern Territory, Victor replied. Are you leaving so soon? The maid's voice was a little lower. He immediately understood what she was thinking. If she did not renew the room this time, she would have to serve other customers, which was obviously much more troublesome than getting paid for cleaning the room every day. Victor did not think it was a big deal, but compared to changing a maid, he felt it was better to let Tinkle continue to serve him before he got tired of it. Don't worry, I'll pay the Golden Dragon the next time I return to Neverwinter. Really? Tinkle's eyes lit up. Chapter 12-17. In the past 6 months, although Victor Lothar had been staying in the Southern Territory, he had been paying close attention to Neverwinter. In his eyes, this city would undoubtedly be the center of the future, not only for Grey Castle, but also for the other 3 kingdoms and the fjords. Since the publication of Grey Castle Weekly, he had ordered his men to buy it as soon as possible and send it to the port of Clearwater. This time, he took the time to return to Neverwinter because of 2 major events he had read in the newspaper. One was the sale of the Miracle Building, and the other was the premiere of the new magic movie, The Dust of Oblivion. He did not understand why the King of Grey Castle was so concerned about ownership. For example, he needed to obtain an ID card before buying a house, which meant that he was a Neverwinter citizen. The problem was that this ID card did not restrict his movements. Whether he stayed in the port of Clearwater or returned to the city of Glow, there were no restrictions. In this case, what was the point of emphasizing that he was an official citizen of Neverwinter to a traveling businessman like him? In any case, it was fine as long as he could participate in the purchase. The tallest building in the whole continent, and it was located in the center of the new King's City. Anyone who came to this place would not miss such a magnificent view. There was nothing more suitable than this to advertise the Rainbow Stone. Of course, even if he did not buy the Miracle Building, he would not feel too regretful. After all, as the first businessman to cooperate with His Majesty on the new cotton variety, he had already gained the upper hand in the industry. For Victor, the second event was far more important than the first. He would never forget the feeling when he watched the magic movie for the first time. It was absolutely a soul-deep shock. In other words, as the curtain opened, the body no longer existed, leaving only the soul to wander in an incredible world. He had watched The Wolf Princess several times. If he had not decided to go to the Southern Territory to grow cotton, he would have bought the tickets for every show. Although he could not guess the content of the new magic movie, The Dust of Oblivion, from the title, the original members of the Starflower Troupe, and the screenplay written by the master dramatist Cajun Fells were enough to attract his attention. Moreover, in the introduction, it was mentioned that the story was based on a real event and had the help of His Majesty Roland Wimbledon. All the unknown secrets in the play came from the Royal Library. It was important to know that such insider information was often not disclosed to the commoners, and the rumors circulating in the streets or taverns were too outrageous. They could be used to pass time with idle chatter, but they could not be trusted at all. Now that he had a chance to see a small part of the secret, and it was through the magic movie, no matter which part of the script was revealed, the gimmick was already very important. How could he miss such an opportunity? This was the main reason why Victor made a special trip to Neverwinter. After arriving at the administrative office, Ling Long busied herself with applying for services and queuing up for tickets. She quickly took care of everything for him. The ticket price for the first show of the magic movie had risen to 50 golden dragon coins, 10 more than the price of the Wolf Princess. Nevertheless, he did not hesitate to spend 100 golden dragon coins to buy 2 tickets. This scene not only made Ling Long's heart flutter, but also attracted the attention of other people. After all, even foreign businessmen would have to think twice before buying such expensive tickets. Even the price of the second show the next day would be much lower, not to mention the price of the civilian tickets, which were only about 10 silver royals a week later. It was much more troublesome to buy a house in the Miracle Building. After applying, he and Ling Long were invited to a separate room. "You have a Neverwinter ID card?" At this moment, the maid lowered her voice and said in surprise, "But you're not from Grey Castle or Border Town." Victor shrugged and said, "You seem to have forgotten that as long as you buy a house, you can become an official resident of Neverwinter." "Of course I know that," Ling Long protested. "But you usually live in a tavern." "There's no conflict between the two," he said lightly. "I prefer noisy places to a residential area, but that doesn't stop me from buying a house for a rainy day." The maid stared at him with her eyes wide open, and was speechless for a long time. This is the loveliness of a country girl, Victor thought. If it were a noble lady, she would probably look at me as if I were a fool. Just then, a young woman in office uniform came in and said, "Hello, sorry to keep you waiting. I'm Betty, a commissioner of the administrative office. I'm in charge of the registration of the sale of the Miracle Building." "I'm Victor Lothar. I've read your information. You meet the requirements." Betty spoke very quickly. "I have to say, you really have a good eye to be able to pick the Miracle Building out of so many residential areas. This is a landmark that His Majesty personally appointed. You can overlook the whole city from the top. Although the price is a little high, it's definitely worth it." Victor could not help but be startled. Why did it seem that she was afraid that she would not be able to sell it? He cleared his throat and asked, "May I know the price?" "It's all here, Mr. Victor." Betty handed over a piece of paper. Victor opened the paper, and could not help but twitch the corner of his mouth. The price of each floor of the building was marked on it. The first 5 floors were around 100 golden dragons, and from the 5th floor onwards, the price doubled with each additional floor. The price of the 14th floor had reached the astonishing price of 2,000 golden dragons. Tinkle could not help but cover her mouth. "The 15th floor is not for sale?" Victor noticed that the price of the top floor was not on the paper. The Astrology Association and the Alchemist's Workshop have jointly bought the 15th floor. I heard that they plan to establish the Society of Sages and use this building as their headquarters. "I'll buy the 14th floor," Victor interrupted. Looking at the 2 people who were dumbfounded, he quickly added, "2." Even for him, who had been in business for many years, 4,000 golden dragons was a huge sum of money. He was a little hesitant when he saw the price, but after hearing about the Society of Sages, he immediately made up his mind. If Neverwinter was regarded as the center of the future, this so-called headquarters would inevitably affect the other kingdoms. If he could establish a relationship with these two organizations with a long history and a well-known reputation on the continent, even if they only stayed in the same building, it would greatly promote the Rainbow Stone. Wise choice, Mr. Victor. Betty grabbed his hand, looking even more excited than Tinkle. I'll go get the contract. Once you sign your name, the room is yours. After Tinkle left excitedly, Victor heaved a sigh of relief. Why do I feel like she's the one who bought the house instead of me? It's probably related to the performance evaluation, Tinkle pouted. What's that? I heard it from the customers in the tavern. It seems that everyone in the administrative office, from the officials to the apprentices, has an assessment like the completion of their duties. I'm not sure about the details, but their salaries and promotions are related to this. So that's how it is. No wonder every time I come here, I feel that everyone here is full of energy. Victor suddenly felt that he had learned something new. Perhaps it would be good to use it in his textile factory? Well, Tinkle hesitated. You spent so much money to buy the Miracle Building, so it won't be empty in the future, right? As for the tavern, I'll continue to rent it, Victor said with a smile. Of course, the house I bought with 4,000 golden dragons won't be empty either. But you can't live in two places at the same time. That you're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.